Scary story to fall asleep to Mom's cabin in the wood. Hey, I've been listening to this channel for a long time, and I always thought that if I ever sent in a story, it would be about something that happened to me at work, or on some late-night drive, or maybe about one of the creepy houses my uncle used to remodel when I was a teenager. I never thought I'd be writing about my mother, and I definitely never thought I'd be writing about the cabin. I'm going to be vague with names and places, mostly because my family is still around, and some of them would be furious if they knew I was talking about this. Not because they don't believe it happened. That would honestly be easier. They believe it, all right. They just think some things are better left sealed up, boarded over, and forgotten until the woods take them back. But I don't really believe in that anymore. I used to. For most of my life, my mom was the kind of woman people described as warm, sensible, and impossible to scare. She was a nurse for almost 30 years. And I don't mean the kind of nurse who worked at a quiet clinic and spent most of the day checking blood pressure. She worked in emergency rooms. She saw car wrecks, overdoses, knife wounds, heart attacks, kids with broken bones, old people dying with no one there to hold their hands, all of it. So when I say she was hard to scare, I mean she had earned that. She wasn't cold or anything. She cried during movies and rescued spiders with a cup and a piece of mail instead of killing them. But real-life fear, the kind that makes most people freeze up, just didn't seem to get to her the same way. Except when it came to the cabin. Growing up, I knew my mom owned a cabin somewhere north of where we lived. I knew it was in the woods. I knew her parents had left it to her, and I knew we never, ever went there. That was basically all I knew. When I was little, I used to ask about it, because kids hear the word cabin and immediately picture hot chocolate, bunk beds, fishing trips, and maybe roasting marshmallows outside, while your dad pretends he knows how to build a fire. But every time I brought it up, Mom would shut the conversation down. Not angrily. That was the weird thing. If I asked why we never went to Grandpa and Grandma's cabin, she'd just get quiet for a second, like she'd heard someone call her name from another room. Then she'd give me a small smile and say something like, "It's not a vacation place, honey," or "It's too much trouble to keep up," or "There are better places to spend a weekend." My dad was no help either. He'd just shrug and say, "That's your mother's business." At the time, I thought that meant the cabin was probably falling apart, or full of mice or taxes or something boring like that. Adult stuff. The kind of thing kids don't really understand, and don't really care about once there's a television somewhere nearby. But as I got older, I started noticing little things. For one, my mom never threw away anything connected to that place. We had a drawer in the kitchen where she kept old keys, batteries, twist ties, birthday candles, expired coupons, and all the other random junk every family somehow ends up collecting. In the very back of that drawer, under a packet of takeout menus and a dead garage remote, there was a key on a leather tag. I found it when I was maybe 12. The key was old, heavy, and dark around the teeth, and the leather tag had 3 words written on it in my grandmother's handwriting: North Cabin Door. I remember holding it up and asking, "Is this for the cabin?" My mom was doing dishes at the sink when I asked. The second she saw it in my hand, she dropped the mug she was washing. It didn't shatter or anything. It just hit the bottom of the sink with this sharp clank that made me jump. She turned off the water, dried her hands, and walked over to me. Again, she didn't yell. She just took the key out of my hand and said, "Don't play with this." I said I wasn't playing with it. I was just asking, she said. Then don't ask. That was the first time I remember feeling like the cabin wasn't just some neglected family property. It was something else. Something my mother had built a wall around inside her head. After that, the cabin became one of those subjects I poked at only when I felt brave enough. When I was 15, I asked if we could sell it and use the money for something useful, like a car, when I turned 16. That actually made my dad laugh, but Mom didn't even smile. She just said, "It can't be sold." I asked why not. She said, "Because it belongs to me." I said that if it belonged to her, then obviously she could sell it. She looked right at me and said, "That isn't always how belonging works." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. A few years later, after I moved out and started college, my dad got sick, cancer. I won't get into all the details, but it was one of those fast, unfair kinds. The kind where everyone spends the first month saying things like treatment options and staying positive. And then by the third month, everybody knows exactly where it's going, but nobody wants to be the first one to say it out loud. He died in late October on a rainy morning that smelled like wet leaves and hospital soap. My mom changed after that, not in a dramatic way. She didn't fall apart or start drinking or disappear into grief like people do in movies. She still got up early. She still went to work for a while. She still sent me texts asking if I was eating enough vegetables. But something in her got quieter. She stopped humming in the kitchen. That was the thing I noticed most. My whole childhood, Mom hummed when she cooked. Not songs with words, really. Just little tunes she made up or half remembered from church or old radio stations. After Dad died, the kitchen went silent. Then, about 6 months after the funeral, she called me on a Tuesday night and asked if I could come over that weekend to help her move some boxes. I figured she meant Dad's things. And I was right, mostly. When I got there Saturday morning, she had already packed up a lot of his clothes and books. His old work boots were by the back door. His fishing jacket was folded over a chair. There were cardboard boxes all over the living room, each one labeled in my mom's careful handwriting. Donate, keep, ask Daniel. I'm Daniel, by the way. We spent most of the day sorting through things. It was sad, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't one big emotional breakdown. It was more like being bitten by mosquitoes. Small, painful little moments over and over again. Finding a receipt in his coat pocket, smelling his aftershave on a scarf, seeing his handwriting on a note that just said, "Need milk." At some point, maybe around 4, Mom brought down a box from the hall closet and set it on the dining room table. Unlike the others, this one wasn't labeled. It was old and soft at the corners, and it had clearly been opened and closed 100 times over the years. The tape had gone yellow and brittle. On the top, written in faded black marker, were the initials EM, my grandmother's initials. Mom sat down across from me and stared at the box for a long time. I asked, "What's that?" she said. "Things from my mother." I nodded, waiting for her to open it. She didn't. Instead, she pushed it toward me. "You should have these," she said. I laughed a little because thought she was giving me old photos or family documents or something. I said, "Why me?" she said. "Because I should have given them to you sooner." That took the humor out of the room pretty fast. I opened the box. Inside were exactly the kinds of things you'd expect at first. Old photographs, a few letters tied with string, a cracked pair of glasses in a case. A Bible with my grandmother's maiden name written inside. There was also a folded quilt square, a silver locket, and a small stack of Polaroids held together with a rubber band that had almost dried out completely. The first few pictures were normal. My grandparents standing beside an old truck, my mom as a little girl in a yellow coat, a black dog sleeping under a porch swing. Then I got to a photo of the cabin. I knew what it was instantly, even though I had never seen it before. It sat in a clearing surrounded by tall, dark trees, the kind that make a place look shaded even in daylight. The cabin itself was larger than I expected. Not huge, but not some little one-room shack either. It had a steep roof, a stone chimney, and a covered porch that sagged slightly on one side. There was something written above the door. At first, I thought it was just a carved decoration. But when I held the photo closer, I could make out the words, "Be still." That was it. Just be still. I asked Mom what it meant. She was looking at the picture too, but not like someone remembering a summer vacation. More like someone watching an old wound open. My father carved that, she said. Why? He said the woods liked quiet. I waited for her to laugh or explain that Grandpa had been joking. She didn't. I flipped to the next photo. This one showed my mom, maybe 11 or 12 years old, standing on the porch with her parents. My grandmother looked tired but happy. My grandfather looked stern, like old men in old photos always seem to. Mom looked small and stiff between them. Behind them, in the cabin window, there was a pale blur. I leaned closer. It looked like a face. Not a clear face. Not enough that I could say eyes, nose, mouth, anything like that. But it was definitely the shape of something looking out from inside the cabin. I turned the photo toward Mom and said, "Who's that?" She didn't answer. Her eyes moved to the window in the picture, and every bit of color drained out of her face. I said, "Mom?" She stood up so fast the chair legs scraped the floor. "Put it back," she said. "What?" "Put it back in the box." I did, because the way she said it made me feel like I was holding something dangerous, not a photo, not paper. Something with teeth. She took the whole stack of Polaroids from me and pressed them against her chest. Then she closed her eyes. For a second, I honestly thought she was going to faint. I got up and asked if she needed water, but she shook her head. "No," she said. "I need to tell you something before I lose my nerve." That was the first time my mother ever admitted there was a story, not just a reason, a story. We sat back down at the table. Outside, it had started raining, and the sound of it tapping against the windows made the house feel smaller than usual. Mom kept the Polaroids in front of her with both hands resting on top of them, like she was afraid they might slide away on their own. She said, "Your father knew some of it." "Some of what?" "The cabin." I didn't say anything. She looked toward the kitchen drawer, the one where I knew she still kept the old key. Then she said, "When I was a girl, my mother used to take me there every summer. My father hated the place, but he came because she insisted. She said the cabin had been in her family too long to abandon." I asked how long. Mom said, "Since before anyone wrote it down properly." That sounded dramatic, and I almost made some dumb comment about curses or ghosts, because that's what I would have done back then to cut the tension. But something about her face stopped me. She wasn't telling a ghost story. She was confessing to one. She said my grandmother's family had owned that patch of woods for generations. Nobody had ever made much money from it. The land was too rocky for proper farming, too far from town for development, and too strange for people to stay long. That was the word she used. Strange. Not haunted. Not cursed. Strange. The cabin had been built by one of my grandmother's great-grandfathers sometime in the late 1800s. Though Mom said she wasn't completely sure about the date. It had been repaired, expanded, abandoned, repaired again, and passed down through the family like an heirloom nobody actually wanted, but nobody dared throw away. I asked why nobody wanted it. Mom said, because everyone who stayed there too long started hearing things. At first, it was always harmless. That was how she explained it. A voice calling from the tree line when nobody was there. Footsteps on the porch after midnight. 3 knocks on the back wall during heavy rain. Someone whispering your name from the cold fireplace. Things like that. I remember just staring at her because, honestly, it was hard to connect the woman sitting across from me with the words coming out of her mouth. My mom was practical. My mom believed in antibiotics and tire pressure and paying bills early. She did not believe in whispers coming out of fireplaces, or at least that's what I had always thought. She told me that when she was a kid, she assumed the adults were making it up to scare her away from the woods. Her mother, my grandmother, had rules for the cabin, and every rule seemed ridiculous if you didn't know the history behind it. Don't answer if someone calls your name from outside. Don't look through the kitchen window after dark. Don't leave food on the porch. Don't whistle in the trees. And most importantly, if you wake up in the night and hear someone walking around inside the cabin, keep your eyes closed and be still. That phrase again. Be still. I asked what happened if you didn't. Mom looked down at her hands. Then she said, "My brother found out." That was how I learned I had an uncle. Not a living one, not one anyone talked about, but an uncle all the same. His name was Peter, and until that rainy Saturday at my mother's dining room table, I had never heard his name once in my entire life. My mother had a brother. That sentence probably sounds normal to most people, but to me it felt like the floor had shifted a few inches under my chair. I was 24 years old at the time. I had gone through my whole life thinking I knew the basic shape of my family. Mom was an only child. Dad had one sister, Aunt Carol, who sent Christmas cards with glitter on them and always smelled like peppermint gum. My grandparents on Mom's side had died before I was old enough to remember them clearly. That was the family tree as I understood it. Then, out of nowhere, there was Peter. I actually laughed, not because I thought it was funny, but because my brain didn't know what else to do with the information. I said, "You had a brother?" Mom nodded. "And you never told me." She didn't answer right away. She looked down at the stack of Polaroids again, pressing her thumb into the top one until it bent slightly. "I tried not to think of him as my brother," she said. That hit me in a strange way. Not because it sounded cruel. Exactly. It sounded worse than cruel. It sounded practiced. Like something she'd told herself so many times that it had become less of a sentence and more of a survival technique. I asked, "What happened to him?" Mom swallowed. "He disappeared," I said. "At the cabin?" She nodded again. The rain was coming down harder by then. It made this soft, steady rushing sound on the roof, and for a few seconds neither of us said anything. I remember looking around the dining room like maybe there was some normal object that could anchor me back in normal life. The salt shaker, the mail on the counter, Dad's old reading glasses sitting on top of a newspaper he would never finish. But everything felt different once I knew there had been a missing person in the family, especially a missing child. Mom told me Peter was 2 years older than her. According to her, he was the kind of boy adults described as difficult when what they really meant was lonely, loud, and smarter than they knew how to handle. He asked too many questions. He didn't like being told what to do. He had a mean streak when he was embarrassed, but he could also be sweet in ways that made people forgive him too easily. "He was my best friend when we were little," she said, "until he wasn't." I asked what that meant. She said the cabin changed him. Every summer, my grandmother insisted they spend at least 3 weeks there. My grandfather hated it, like I said, but he went because he loved his wife, and because, according to Mom, Grandma became almost impossible to live with if she stayed away from the cabin too long. That was one of the first things Mom said that made me really uncomfortable. Not because of ghosts or noises or anything dramatic like that, but because of the way she phrased it. Like the cabin wasn't a place my grandmother wanted to visit. It was a place she needed to return to, the way some people need a cigarette after dinner or a drink before bed. I asked why Grandma loved it so much if it scared everyone. Mom said, because it didn't scare her. Why not? She thought it was family. I didn't understand that. Mom didn't seem eager to explain. She said that when she and Peter were kids, the cabin didn't look quite as bad as it did in the Polaroid. It was old, but sturdy. The roof didn't leak. The porch still sat level. There was a hand pump outside, a wood stove in the kitchen, 2 bedrooms downstairs, and a loft above the main room where the kids slept. There was no electricity for most of her childhood visits. No phone either. If something went wrong, the nearest neighbor was a man named Mr. Voss who lived almost 4 miles down an old logging road. And even he was only there part of the year. So once you were at the cabin, you were really there. No television, no radio unless the weather was good. No lights except lanterns and candles. No sound at night except insects, wind, trees, and whatever moved in the woods after dark. Mom said the first week was usually fine, almost peaceful. Grandma would bake bread in the mornings. Grandpa would chop wood or repair whatever the winter had damaged. And Mom and Peter would explore the creek behind the cabin, catch frogs, throw rocks at cans, and dare each other to go deeper into the trees than they were supposed to. But after a few days, the cabin would start acting like it had noticed them. That was how she put it. Not that strange things began happening. The cabin noticed them. At first, it was small stuff. Things moved. A hairbrush left on the washstand would be found under a bed. A cup would vanish from the kitchen and turn up outside on the chopping stump. Peter's shoes would disappear from the loft and be found lined neatly at the edge of the woods, toes pointed toward the trees. My grandfather blamed Peter for most of it, because Peter was exactly the kind of kid who would hide his own shoes if he thought it might get a reaction. But Mom swore he wasn't doing it. She knew when her brother was lying, and she said the first time those shoes appeared at the tree line, Peter looked more scared than guilty. Then came the voices. Mom said it never sounded like a ghost in a movie. No moaning, no echo, no deep evil whisper crawling up from the floorboards. It sounded normal. That was the worst part. It sounded like someone you knew standing just far enough away that you couldn't quite tell where they were. One afternoon, Mom was picking blackberries near the creek when she heard Grandma calling from somewhere beyond the pines. "Emily," the voice said. That was Mom's name. "Emily," she almost answered. In fact, she opened her mouth to answer. But before she could, Peter grabbed her arm hard enough to hurt and shook his head. She whispered, "What?" He put his finger to his lips. Then they both heard it again. "Emily." Mom said it sounded exactly like their mother, except flatter somehow. Like a person doing a perfect impression without understanding what the words meant. Peter pulled her behind a fallen tree and made her crouch there with him. A few seconds later, something moved through the woods on the other side of the creek. She never saw it clearly. She only saw the blackberry canes shaking as if someone had walked straight through them, not around them. Through them, the leaves trembled, the branches bent, and a few ripe berries fell off and rolled into the dirt. Then the voice called again, this time from much closer. "Emily, honey, come here." Mom started crying, but Peter clamped a hand over her mouth. They stayed hidden behind the log for what felt like forever. Eventually, they heard their real mother ringing the iron doorbell from the cabin porch, and Peter dragged Mom back the long way, keeping low like they were soldiers in a war movie. When they told the adults, Grandpa turned white with anger. Not fear, anger. He grabbed his rifle from beside the kitchen door and stormed into the woods, shouting that if Mr. Voss or any other drunk fool was messing around on his property, he was going to put birdshot in their backside. Grandma didn't go after him. She just stood on the porch and watched the trees. Mom remembered asking if Dad was going to be okay. Grandma said, as long as he doesn't answer, yes. That was one of the rules. Don't answer, no matter whose voice it uses. When Grandpa came back almost an hour later, he didn't say what he found. He just unloaded the rifle, set it back in the corner, and told everyone to stay close to the cabin until morning. That night, Peter wet the bed in the loft. Mom said he made her swear not to tell because he was 10 and thought it was the most humiliating thing in the world. She helped him pull the blanket off the mattress and hide it under the eaves. And for a while, they just sat together in the dark, listening to their parents talking in low voices downstairs. Peter told her that wasn't the first time he had heard someone calling from the woods. It had happened the previous summer too. Only that time it had used Mom's voice. Mom asked why he never told anyone. Peter said, because I answered. I interrupted my mother there. I couldn't help it. I said, "What do you mean?" he answered. She looked irritated for a second, not at me, but at the memory itself. Like she had been walking carefully through a room full of broken glass and I'd suddenly made a loud noise. He said he thought it was me, she said. The summer before, when Peter was 9 and Mom was 7, He had been out near the hand pump right before sunset. Grandma was inside making supper. Grandpa was down by the shed sharpening tools. Mom was supposedly in the loft, reading one of those old children's books with half the pages falling out. Peter heard her voice from behind the cabin. "Petey," it said. That was what she called him. Not Peter, Pete. So he answered. "What?" the voice giggled. Mom said she hated describing that part because Peter could never describe the giggle properly. He said it sounded like Mom, but also like someone had heard children laughing and was trying to copy it with a mouth that wasn't made for laughing. The voice said, "Come see." Peter, being Peter, got annoyed instead of scared. He thought his little sister had snuck outside and was trying to mess with him. So he walked around the side of the cabin, past the woodpile, toward the narrow space where the back wall faced the trees. There was nobody there. Then the voice came from under the cabin. Down here, the cabin sat on stacked stone supports, leaving a crawl space underneath it. Not a big one, maybe 2 or 3 feet high in places. It was full of damp leaves, spider webs, old boards, and whatever animals decided to hide there. Even in daylight, Mom said, no one liked looking into that space for long. Peter got down on his hands and knees. At the far end of the crawl space, where the light barely reached, he saw someone lying on their stomach. A little girl. At least, that's what he thought at first. She was facing away from him, elbows bent, bare feet dirty, hair hanging down over one shoulder. She wore something pale that might have been a nightgown or might have been one of Mom's summer dresses. Peter said, "Emily?" The girl under the cabin turned her head. Not her whole body, just her head. And according to Peter, she turned it too far. Farther than a person should be able to. He scrambled backwards so fast he tore the skin off both elbows. He ran around to the front porch screaming, and when Grandma finally got him calm enough to speak, he told her there was someone under the cabin. Grandpa checked with the rifle and a lantern. There was nothing there, but the next morning, they found a row of small handprints in the damp dirt beneath the floorboards. Not animal tracks, not raccoon prints. Hands, child-sized. All of them pointed inward, toward the center of the crawl space, as if a group of children had been lying under the cabin during the night, reaching up toward the floor. Grandpa wanted to leave after that. Mom said he packed the truck and told Grandma they were done, not just for the summer, forever. He said he didn't care what her family believed, what promises had been made, or what old stories her mother had filled her head with. He was not bringing his children back to a place where voices called from the woods and handprints appeared under the floor. Grandma didn't argue. She just went into the cabin and locked the door. For almost 3 hours, she refused to come out. Grandpa shouted. Peter cried. Mom sat on the porch steps and watched the trees because she was too scared to look anywhere else. Finally, Grandma opened the door. She looked sick, Mom said, sweaty and pale like she had a fever. But she was calm. She told Grandpa they could leave in the morning. Not that day. Morning. He was furious, obviously, but the road out was rough and narrow, and by then the sun was already dropping. Driving it after dark would have been stupid, especially with 2 frightened kids and a truck full of half-packed supplies. So they stayed one more night. Mom told me that was when Peter started talking in his sleep. At first, it was just mumbling. Then, sometime after midnight, she woke up in the loft to hear her brother whispering beside her. I didn't mean to. She thought he was awake, she whispered. Pete? His eyes were closed. He said it again. I didn't mean to. Then a voice from downstairs whispered back, Yes, you did. Mom froze. The voice had not come from either of her parents' bedroom. It had come from the main room, right below the loft ladder. She wanted to scream. She wanted to wake Peter. She wanted to run down the ladder and into her parents' room. But then she remembered the rule carved above the cabin door. Be still. So she lay there in the dark, staring at her sleeping brother, while something below them started climbing the ladder one slow rung at a time. Mom told me she still remembered the sound of that ladder. Not the whole night, clearly, not every second, but that sound stayed with her. One rung, then a pause, another rung, then another pause. The ladder to the loft was old, made of thick wood worn smooth in the middle by generations of hands and feet. During the day, it creaked whenever anyone climbed it, but at night, in the dark cabin, with everyone supposed to be asleep, each creak sounded enormous. Mom lay on her side facing Peter. He was still asleep, or at least his eyes were still closed. His lips moved slightly, and every few seconds he whispered the same thing. I didn't mean to. Down below, whatever had answered him kept climbing. Mom said she wanted to reach out and shake her brother awake, but she couldn't move. It wasn't like being frozen in a dream. She was awake. She knew she was awake because she could smell the loft the way it always smelled at night, like dust, old blankets, dry wood, and the faint sour stink of the chamber pot they were supposed to use if they had to pee after dark. She could hear the rain outside. She could hear her own breathing. She could hear the ladder. Then Peter opened his eyes. He didn't sit up. He didn't scream. He just opened his eyes and looked past Mom toward the square hole in the loft floor. The next creak came from the top rung. Mom said she saw fingers curl around the edge of the loft. That was all at first. Just fingers. Long, pale fingers with dirt under the nails. They gripped the floorboards at the edge of the opening, and for a second, nothing else happened. Peter made this small choking sound, like he was trying to breathe through a mouthful of water. The fingers tightened. Then a head rose slowly into view. Mom stopped talking there. At my dining room table, all those years later, she stopped and pressed both hands over her mouth. I could see she was back there. Not remembering like people usually remember things, but reliving it. Her eyes were focused on something over my shoulder, and for one horrible second, I almost turned around because her fear was so convincing that some stupid, primitive part of my brain believed there might actually be someone standing behind me. I asked her what she saw. She shook her head. Not someone, she said. That was all she said at first. Not someone. Eventually, she told me it looked like a child and an old woman at the same time. Small enough to be a child, but with skin too loose around the mouth and eyes. Its hair hung in wet strings down both sides of its face, and its mouth was open in a soft little smile that showed no teeth at all. But the worst part was the face, because for the first few seconds, Mom thought it had her face. Not exactly. Not like a twin. More like something had taken the idea of her face and stretched it over a shape that didn't belong to it. The thing looked at Peter. Then it whispered. Peter screamed. And when he screamed, all hell broke loose. Grandpa came crashing out of the bedroom with his rifle. Grandma screamed from somewhere below. Mom rolled backward into the wall so hard she cracked her head against one of the beams. Peter kicked at the thing near the ladder opening, and Mom said its hand shot out and grabbed his ankle. She said its arm was too long. That was one of the details she kept repeating. Too long, too long, too long. It grabbed Peter by the ankle and pulled, and Peter slid halfway toward the hole before Mom grabbed the back of his nightshirt and held on. She was only 8 years old then, so it's not like she could really fight it, but she held him long enough for Grandpa to reach the bottom of the ladder. He fired once, inside the cabin. Mom said the sound was so loud she didn't actually hear it. Everything just became pressure and light and smoke. The thing let go of Peter, or maybe it dropped down, or maybe the blast knocked it away. Mom couldn't say for sure. All she knew was that Peter scrambled backward into the corner and curled up with his arms over his head. Grandpa climbed up with the rifle in one hand and a lantern in the other. There was nothing there, no body, no blood, no bullet hole in anything except the wall beside the loft opening. But Peter's ankle had a dark bruise around it in the shape of a hand. Mom said the fingers went almost all the way around his leg. They left before sunrise, not at sunrise. Before. Grandpa didn't care about the road or the dark or whether it was safe to drive. He loaded the truck by lantern light while Grandma stood on the porch, crying and begging him to wait until morning. She kept saying it wasn't safe to leave before first light. Grandpa shouted back that it wasn't safe to stay one more minute. Mom said that was the first and only time she ever saw her father raise a hand to her mother. He didn't hit her, not exactly, but he grabbed her by the arms and shoved her away from the cabin door when she tried to stop him from carrying out the last suitcase. Grandma looked more shocked than hurt. Then she said something Mom never forgot. "You'll make it follow us." Grandpa told her to get in the truck. She refused. So he picked her up and put her in himself. Mom and Peter were already in the back seat, wrapped in blankets, both of them crying in that quiet, exhausted way kids cry when they've gone past panic and into something else. Mom said Peter wouldn't let anyone touch his ankle. He just kept staring at the cabin through the rear window. As they drove away, the front door opened. Grandpa saw it in the mirror. Mom saw it too. The cabin door swung inward slowly, like someone inside had decided to watch them leave. No one stood in the doorway. At least not at first. Then, just before the truck turned around the bend and the cabin disappeared behind the trees, Mom saw a pale hand reach out and touch the doorframe. She never told anyone that part until she told me. They didn't go back for 3 years. That should have been the end of it, obviously. Any normal family would have sold the place, burned it down, or just let the forest swallow it and never spoken of it again. Grandpa wanted exactly that. He told Grandma that whatever obligation her family thought they had to that place was over. He wasn't going to risk his children because her dead relatives had made some fool promise to a pile of rotten logs in the woods, but Grandma changed after they left. Mom said it started with small things. At breakfast, Grandma would set 5 plates instead of 4. When Grandpa pointed it out, she'd blink like she'd just woken up and say she must have been distracted. Then she'd take the extra plate away and act embarrassed. A few days later, Mom walked into the hallway and found Grandma standing at the front door with her coat on. It was 2 in the morning. Mom asked where she was going. Grandma turned around with this dazed look on her face and said, "He's cold." Mom asked who. Grandma said, "The one under the floor." The next morning, Grandma didn't remember any of it, or said she didn't. Peter got worse too, but in a different way. Before the cabin, he had been loud and difficult, but still a normal boy. After that night, he became quiet, not shy, quiet. Like he was always listening to something no one else could hear. He stopped playing outside after dark. He stopped sleeping unless there was a lamp on, and every now and then, Mom would catch him staring at the floor in their house, his eyes moving slowly, as if he were following footsteps underneath the boards. One time, she asked him what he was looking at. He said, "It doesn't know this house yet." That scared her so badly she ran to tell their mother. Grandma just slapped Peter across the face. Mom said it was the only time she ever saw Grandma hit either of them. She hit him hard enough to split his lip, then grabbed him by the shoulders and said, "Don't you invite it." Peter didn't cry. He just looked at her with blood on his teeth and said, "I already did." After that, the house was never peaceful again. Not haunted in the way people imagine. No objects flying around the room. No shadow people standing at the foot of the bed. Nothing dramatic enough that you could call a priest or tell the neighbors without sounding insane. It was subtler than that. Every night at 2:13 in the morning, someone knocked 3 times from inside the hall closet. At first, Grandpa thought it was the pipes. Then he tore open the wall behind the closet and found no pipes there. The family dog, a mutt named Charlie, refused to come inside after sunset. He would sit on the porch and whine until somebody let him sleep in the shed. If they forced him inside, he scratched at the front door until his paws bled. Mom started waking up with dirt in her bed. Not a lot, just a small sprinkling near her feet. like someone with muddy hands had touched the sheets. Peter began talking in his sleep every night. Sometimes he said, "I didn't mean to." Sometimes he said, "I won't tell." And sometimes he spoke in a voice that wasn't his, a thin old voice that said things like, "You came from us," and "The girl is quiet," and "The boy is open." Grandpa took him to doctors. This was the late 60s, so from what Mom said, doctors weren't exactly gentle with a boy who heard voices after a traumatic event. One said it was nerves. Another said Peter was seeking attention. A third suggested sending him away for a while, which sent Grandpa into such hysterics that Grandpa almost punched the man. Nobody talked about therapy back then the way people do now. Nobody knew what to call it. And even if they had, Mom said therapy wouldn't have explained the dead birds. That started in the spring. Every morning for 2 weeks, there was a dead bird on the front step. Always the same kind, black feathers, neck broken, placed neatly with its beak pointed toward the door. Grandpa buried them at first. Then he started throwing them in the trash. Then one morning he opened the door and found 13 of them arranged in a circle on the porch. In the middle of the circle was the old cabin key. The same key I had found in the kitchen drawer as a kid. The same dark, heavy key with the leather tag that said North Cabin Door. Grandpa had locked it in a metal box in the basement after they left the cabin. The box was still locked when he checked. The key inside was gone. That night, Grandma told him they had to go back. Grandpa said no. Grandma said if they didn't, Peter would die. I asked Mom how Grandma knew that. Mom looked at me for a long time before answering. Then she said, "Because Peter told her." Apparently, Peter had woken her in the middle of the night, standing beside her bed in his pajamas. His eyes were open, but Grandma didn't think he was awake. He said, "It wants what looked back." Grandma asked what that meant. Peter said, "It looked at me, so I looked back." Then he smiled, not like himself. Mom said Grandma described it years later as a borrowed smile. Peter said, "If we don't come home by summer, I'll go under the floor." The next morning, Grandma started packing. Grandpa refused right up until the second week of June, when Peter disappeared from his bedroom for 6 hours and was found asleep in the crawl space under their actual house. There was no way he should have been able to get there. The crawl space hatch was outside, padlocked, and the lock hadn't been touched. But there he was, curled up in the dirt, barefoot, wearing his pajamas, with both hands pressed over his ears. When Grandpa dragged him out, Peter woke up screaming, not because he didn't know where he was, because he did. He looked at his father and said, "It found the bottom." 2 days later, they drove back to the cabin. Mom didn't want to go. Peter didn't either. Grandpa definitely didn't. But Grandma said the only way to end it was to return what had been carried away. When I asked my mother what that meant, she rubbed her eyes and said she didn't know then. Then she added, "But I know now." The drive up was quiet. Mom said nobody spoke for the last hour except Grandma, who sat in the passenger seat with the cabin key in her lap, murmuring prayers under her breath. Only Mom wasn't sure they were prayers. She recognized some of the words from church, but the rest sounded older somehow. Not another language exactly. Just words said wrong, as if Grandma had learned them from someone who had only heard them through a wall. When they reached the old logging road, Grandpa stopped the truck. For a minute, he just sat there, gripping the wheel. Then he looked back at Peter and said, "If anything calls you, you do not answer. If anything shows itself, you do not look. If your mother tells you to do something strange, you look at me first. Do you understand?" Peter nodded. Mom nodded too, even though he hadn't been talking to her. They drove the final 4 miles through the trees. The cabin was exactly where they had left it. Of course it was, but Mom said it looked different. Not older, not damaged. Different. The windows were dark, the porch was empty, and the words above the door seemed deeper than before, like someone had carved them again while the family was gone. "Be still." Grandma got out first. She stood in front of the cabin with the key in her hand and closed her eyes. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, from somewhere under the porch, a child's voice whispered, "Peter came back." And Peter, standing beside my mother in the weeds, whispered back, "I know." Mom said that was the first time she understood. Peter was not just scared of the cabin. He was connected to it. That might sound obvious now, sitting here with the benefit of hindsight and all the pieces laid out in order. But she was still only a child. To her, Peter was her brother, her annoying, secretive, frightened brother. The same boy who used to steal the last biscuit from her plate and then give her half of it back when their mother wasn't looking. The same boy who once put a frog in her pillowcase and then cried harder than she did when Grandma threatened to make him sleep outside. So when he whispered, "I know," to whatever had spoken from under the porch, Mom didn't think he was betraying them. She thought he was sick. Grandpa heard him too. He spun around so fast he nearly slipped in the weeds, then grabbed Peter by the front of his shirt and shook him. "What did I tell you?" he hissed. Peter didn't even look at him. His eyes were fixed on the dark gap beneath the porch. Grandpa shook him again, harder that time. "What did I tell you?" Peter blinked like someone coming out of a dream. Then he looked at his father and started crying. "I didn't mean to," he said, that phrase again. "I didn't mean to." Grandpa let go of him, but not gently. Peter stumbled back into Mom, and she caught him as best she could. He was trembling all over. Mom said she could feel it through both their shirts. Grandma walked past them with the key in her hand. Grandpa told her not to open the door. She ignored him. He said her name, sharply this time, and she stopped with one foot on the porch step. For a second, Mom thought her parents were going to have the kind of fight children remember forever. But Grandma only turned her head slightly and said, "You brought him back too late." Grandpa said, "No, you brought us back at all." Grandma looked at him then, and Mom said she had never seen so much hatred pass between two people who still loved each other. Then Grandma climbed the porch steps. The boards groaned under her feet. She unlocked the cabin. The door opened inward and the smell rolled out. Mom said that was the thing nobody ever gets right about old houses. People think they smell like dust or wood rot or mildew, and most of them do. But the cabin had a different smell that day. It smelled like wet dirt, cold ashes, and something sweet that had spoiled. Grandpa covered his nose with one hand and muttered, "Christ Almighty." Grandma told him not to take the Lord's name there. He laughed once, but it didn't sound like humor. It sounded like a man trying not to lose his mind. Inside, the cabin looked almost normal. Almost. The furniture was where they had left it. The table near the window. The old rocker by the fireplace. The iron stove in the kitchen. The ladder leading up to the loft. Dust lay over everything in a soft gray skin, and there were mouse droppings along the baseboards, which made the place feel abandoned in a regular, understandable way. But then Mom saw the floor. At first, she thought someone had spilled black paint. There were lines all over the boards. Long, looping lines that ran from the fireplace to the kitchen. From the kitchen to the bedroom doors. From the bedroom doors to the front entrance. And then back again in tangled paths. They crossed over each other so many times that in places the floor was almost completely dark. Grandpa crouched down and touched one. He smelled his fingers. Then he stood up and told the kids to stay outside. Mom asked what it was. He said, "Mud." But Mom knew it wasn't mud. Mud dries brown or gray. This was black, and it had been drawn, not tracked in. The lines had shapes inside them too, not letters exactly. Not pictures either. More like the kind of meaningless doodles a child makes before they learn how to write, except repeated with such careful patience that they stopped looking childish after a while. Grandma stepped inside and closed her eyes. She whispered, "She's been busy." Grandpa said, "Who?" Grandma didn't answer. Peter moved before anyone could stop him. He walked into the cabin, straight past his mother. straight past his father, and knelt in the center of the room. Mom remembered this part very clearly because he didn't look afraid anymore. If anything, he looked relieved. He put one hand on the black markings, then he said, "It's not her." Grandma's face changed. "What did you say?" Peter looked up at her. "It's not her anymore." No one spoke after that. Mom said even the woods seemed to go quiet. Then something knocked 3 times under the floor. Not from outside, not from the porch, under the floor, 3 slow knocks. Grandpa raised the rifle. Grandma whispered, "Put that down." The knocking came again, 3 times. Peter started to cry, but not like before. No sobbing, no panic. Tears just slipped down his face while he stared at the floorboards. Grandma knelt in front of him and grabbed his chin. "Listen to me," she said. "Did you tell it your name?" Peter shook his head. "Did you give it anything?" He shook his head again. "Did you promise?" Peter didn't answer. Grandma's grip tightened. "Peter, did you promise it anything?" he whispered. "I promised not to tell." Grandma closed her eyes. Grandpa said, "Tell what?" Peter looked toward the fireplace. Mom followed his gaze. At the back of the fireplace, where old ashes lay heaped beneath the flue, there was a small handprint, not made in soot, made through it, as if a small hand had pressed from inside the chimney and dragged downward. Grandpa stepped toward it. Grandma said, "Don't." He didn't listen. He took the poker from beside the hearth and scraped the ashes aside. Under them, the bricks at the back of the fireplace were loose. Not all of them. Just 3 near the bottom, where the firebox met the floor. Grandpa looked back at Grandma. She had gone pale. He pried one brick loose. Behind it was a hollow space. Mom said a wave of cold came out of it so strong that the lantern flame fluttered even though there was no wind inside. Grandpa pulled out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. It was small, too small. At the time, Mom didn't understand what she was seeing. She thought maybe it was a dead animal, or an old doll, or some kind of family keepsake hidden away for reasons adults would explain later. Grandpa understood first. He dropped the bundle. Then he turned and vomited onto the floor. Grandma didn't move. She only stared at the bundle and whispered, "Oh, Mary." That was when Mom learned the first part of the cabin's real story. Not all of it, just enough to ruin the rest of her childhood. The bundle held bones, tiny bones, a baby's bones, wrapped in cloth that had once been white. Grandpa started shouting. He shouted at Grandma, asking what the hell it was. How long she had known, whether it was one of her people, whether her mother had known, whether this was why she kept dragging them back to that God-forsaken place year after year. Grandma did not shout back. She sat down in the rocking chair like her legs had given out and said, "My grandmother told me there was a child in the walls." Grandpa stared at her. "In the walls?" "She said it wrong," Grandma said. "Or I remembered it wrong." The knocks came again from under the floor. 3 times. Peter covered his ears. Grandma said the child's name had been Mary Bell, or maybe just Mary. The family records were unclear, and the story had been softened over time, because that's what families do with horrible things. They sand the edges down until a murder becomes a tragedy, and a tragedy becomes a rumor, and a rumor becomes something children are scolded for repeating. Mary had been born sometime in the 1880s to one of Grandma's or great-aunts, a woman named Ruth. Ruth was unmarried, which back then was apparently enough to turn pregnancy into a family catastrophe. The father was either unknown or known and protected. Grandma said different people told it different ways. Some claimed he was a traveling preacher. Others said he was Ruth's own cousin, which was probably why nobody wanted the truth written anywhere. Ruth gave birth at the cabin, not because she wanted to, because her family sent her there to hide the shame. She stayed there through the winter with only an older female relative to help her. By spring, Ruth returned home without the baby and told everyone the child had been stillborn. That was the official story. But the cabin, according to Grandma, never let the lie settle. The first person to hear crying in the walls was Ruth herself, then her mother, then her brother. Over the years, anyone who stayed in the cabin long enough heard a baby crying from some impossible place. Behind the fireplace, beneath the floor, inside the walls, under the porch. Eventually, one of Ruth's brothers went mad and hanged himself from a beam in the loft. After that, the family stopped staying there for a while, but they never sold the land and they never tore the cabin down. Grandpa asked why. Grandma looked at the bundle on the floor. Because she wasn't alone, nobody understood what she meant. Then Peter said, "The others." That was when Grandma began to sob. Mom told me she had never heard an adult make a sound like that. Not crying exactly. Something lower and uglier, like grief mixed with terror. Grandma slid out of the rocking chair onto her knees and tried to reach for Peter, but he backed away from her. "She showed me," he said. Grandpa asked who. Peter pointed to the fireplace, the girl under the house. Grandpa demanded to know what she showed him. Peter said there were more children, not all babies, some older, some almost his age. They were under the floor, in the walls, in the dirt beneath the porch, and in the woods where the roots grew thickest. He said they were all quiet during the day, but started whispering after dark. He said they didn't know their names anymore, so they tried to borrow names from anyone who answered. That was why you didn't answer. If you answered, they could wear your voice. If you looked too long, they could remember your face. And if you promised them something, they could follow you wherever you went. Grandpa said Peter was talking nonsense, but he didn't sound convinced. Grandma asked Peter what he promised. Peter wiped his nose on his sleeve and said, "I promised I'd open the little door." Grandma looked confused. So did Grandpa, but Mom knew. She said there was a small door in the back bedroom closet. It was only about 2 feet high, built low into the wall, and she had always assumed it opened into storage space beneath the stairs or some useless gap in the construction. It was locked with an old iron latch, and Grandma had told them never to touch it because it was full of rusty tools. Peter stood up. Without being asked, he walked toward the back bedroom. Grandpa grabbed him by the shoulder. Peter screamed, not in fear, in pain. Smoke rose from beneath Grandpa's fingers. He let go, and there on Peter's shoulder, burned through his shirt and into his skin, were 4 dark fingerprints. Grandma whispered, "It has him." The cabin door slammed shut. Not from the wind. There was no wind. Every adult in the room jumped, and Mom started crying again. She ran to the door and tried to pull it open, but it wouldn't budge. Grandpa shoved her aside and tried too. Nothing. He threw his shoulder against it hard enough to shake dust from the rafters, but the door stayed shut. Then, from somewhere in the back bedroom, something small scratched at the other side of the little closet door. Peter smiled. Again, Mom said it wasn't his smile. He said, "She wants out before dark." Mom said nobody moved at first. Not because they didn't understand what Peter had said, because they did. The thing in the back bedroom wanted out before dark, and somehow that was worse than if Peter had said it wanted to kill them, or eat them, or drag them under the floor. Those words would have made sense in the way nightmares make sense. They would have given the adults something to fight against. But wants out sounded almost reasonable. Like there was someone trapped. Like opening the little door might even be the decent thing to do. Grandpa recovered first. He grabbed Peter by the arm again, then seemed to remember what had happened to his hand and let go before touching skin. Instead, he caught the back of Peter's shirt and pulled him away from the hallway that led to the bedroom. Peter didn't fight him. He just looked disappointed. Grandma stood in the center of the room with both hands clenched in front of her mouth. Mom said she looked torn in half. Part of her wanted to run to Peter and protect him. Part of her wanted to run to the little door and open it herself. And part of her, the part that was still sane, knew both those instincts were dangerous. The scratching came again. Soft, patient, Not like an animal trying to claw its way out. More like fingernails dragging over wood in slow circles. Grandpa said, "We're leaving." Grandma laughed at that. It came out too high and too sharp. "The door won't open. Then I'll break a window." Grandpa took one step toward the front window, and the rocking chair beside the fireplace began moving on its own. Just slightly at first. Back, forth, back, forth. Everyone stared. The cabin was dim in that late afternoon way, where there was still light outside but not enough inside, and the corners of the room had begun to fill up with shadow. The chair rocked on creaking runners, slow and easy, like someone invisible had just settled into it after a long day. Then a woman's voice whispered from the chair. "You came back loud." Mom said it wasn't the same voice from under the porch. This one was older, drier. It sounded like an old woman speaking through a mouthful of dust. Grandpa raised the rifle toward the chair. Grandma said, "Don't you dare," he said. "Who are you?" The chair rocked, back, forth, the voice said. "She keeps the house. You keep the boy." Grandpa aimed at the chair and fired. The rocking chair exploded. That was how Mom described it. Splinters flew against the wall, the fireplace, the floor, everywhere. The gunshot filled the cabin with smoke again, and Mom screamed so hard her throat hurt. For 1 second after the blast, everything was still. Then every door inside the cabin opened at once. The 2-bedroom doors, the pantry door, the little cabinet doors in the kitchen. And from the back bedroom closet came a child laughing. Not Peter's borrowed laugh, not Mom's copied giggle. A real child's laugh. Bright, happy, excited. Like someone had just been told they could come outside and play. Grandma shouted, "Enough." The laughter stopped. That surprised everyone, I think. Even Grandma. Mom said her mother looked frightened by her own power in that moment, like she had slapped a wild animal and couldn't believe it had actually backed down. Grandma bent and picked up the bundle of baby bones from the floor. She held it carefully, like it was something sleeping. Then she looked at Grandpa and said, "We have to put her where she belongs." Grandpa was shaking with anger. "Where she belongs is in a graveyard." Grandma shook her head. "No, that's not where they put the others." "The others," Grandpa said. "You keep saying that like it's supposed to mean something to me." Grandma's face tightened. "It means my people did something terrible here," Grandpa said. "Your people?" she said. "My blood." I asked my mother then if Grandma had known the whole time. Mom said no, or at least she didn't think so. That was the thing about the cabin. Nobody in the family seemed to know the whole story. They inherited pieces, warnings, rules, half-remembered names, things written in Bibles without explanation. A key passed from mother to daughter, a phrase carved above a door, a fear they treated like tradition, because tradition sounded cleaner than guilt. Grandma knew there had been a baby. She knew a young woman named Ruth had given birth there and come home empty-handed. She knew the cabin cried sometimes. But she did not know about the other children until Peter told her, or until whatever had Peter told her through him. The scratching started again. This time from under the floor, too. Not in one place, everywhere. Tiny nails under the boards, in the walls, behind the fireplace, inside the locked bedroom. The sound spread through the cabin in a slow wave, until it seemed like the whole structure was being gently scraped from the inside. Grandpa backed toward the front window. He turned the rifle around in his hands and swung the butt into the glass. It should have shattered. Instead, the rifle bounced back hard enough to knock him off balance. The glass didn't even crack. Grandma whispered, "You can't break it from inside after it closes." Grandpa stared at her. "And when were you going to mention that?" "I didn't know. You knew enough. I knew stories. You brought our children into stories?" Grandma flinched like he had hit her. Mom said she hated her father a little in that moment, even though she understood him later. At the time, all she saw was her mother standing there with a dead baby in her arms while her father yelled at her. It felt cruel. Then Peter said, "Don't be mean to her." Everyone looked at him. He was standing near the hallway again. Mom didn't see him move there. His face looked normal, mostly. His eyes were wet and red from crying. His lip trembled, but the tone of his voice was wrong. It was too calm, too adult, he said. "She came when she was called," Grandpa said. "Peter." Peter smiled. "Not Peter." Grandma hugged the bundle tighter against her chest. Mom said the room got colder then. Not winter cold, cellar cold, buried cold. The kind of cold that makes your teeth hurt. Peter opened his mouth, and a different voice came out. A girl's voice. "She promised." Grandma whispered, "Who?" The girl inside Peter looked at her. "Your mother's mother's mother." Grandma staggered back a step. "Ruth?" The girl smiled wider. The expression looked awful on Peter's face. "Ruth cried when they took it. Ruth cried when they put me down." Grandma said, "Mary?" Peter's head tilted. That motion bothered Mom more than anything. "It was too loose," she said, "too bird-like." "Mary was warm," the girl said. "Mary was first." Grandpa moved before anyone could stop him. He grabbed Peter and shook him hard, burned fingers or not. "You leave my son alone." Peter's eyes rolled back. Then he screamed in 3 voices at once. His own, the girl's, and something else underneath both of them. Mom covered her ears, but it didn't help. The scream seemed to come up through the floor and down through the ceiling. The lantern flame went blue. The black markings on the floor began to shine wetly in the fading light. Grandpa dropped Peter. Peter collapsed. For one terrible second, Mom thought he was dead. Then he started coughing. His own voice came back between coughs. "Don't open it," he said. "Don't open the little door." Grandma knelt beside him. "What's behind it?" Peter shook his head and cried harder. Grandpa grabbed the lantern and started down the hallway. Grandma shouted for him to stop. He didn't. Mom said that was probably the bravest and stupidest thing he ever did. The back bedroom was the one her grandparents used when the family stayed at the cabin. It had an iron bed, a washstand, a cracked mirror, and a narrow closet built into the far wall. Inside that closet, near the floor, was the little door. Grandpa reached the bedroom and kicked the door open. The scratching stopped all at once. That made it worse. Mom could see only part of him from where she stood in the main room. His back, his shoulder, the rifle in his hand, the lantern light shaking around him. He stepped into the bedroom. Then he said, very softly, "Oh no." Grandma told Mom to stay with Peter. Then she ran after Grandpa, still carrying the bundle of bones. Of course, Mom didn't stay. She helped Peter sit against the wall, then followed far enough to see into the bedroom from the hallway. The room was covered in handprints. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They climbed the walls from floor to ceiling. Some were tiny, no bigger than a toddler's. Some were larger. Some looked almost adult. They were pressed into the dust, dragged through the grime on the window, stamped onto the faded wallpaper in that same black mud from the main room. And every single handprint pointed toward the closet. The closet door was open. The little door inside it was not. But the latch had been scratched almost silver, like something had been working at it from the other side for a very long time. Grandpa stood in front of it, breathing hard. Grandma stepped beside him and began to cry again. Mom whispered, "What is it?" Grandpa turned so fast that she almost ran back. "I told you to stay in the other room." But Mom couldn't stop looking at the little door. There was something carved into it. Not be still. Something else. At first, she couldn't read it because the words had been scratched over and crossed out and covered with handprints. But when the lantern light steadied, she saw enough. No names below. She didn't know what that meant. Peter did. From the main room, he whispered, "They want names." And then, from behind the little door, a baby began to cry. It sounded weak, hungry, real. Grandma made a sound that was almost a moan. Grandpa said, "That's not a baby." But his voice shook. The crying continued. Then a little girl's voice spoke through the door. "Mary is cold." Grandma stepped forward. Grandpa blocked her with one arm. The girl said, "Mary wants Mama." Grandma sobbed. "I'm sorry." The latch lifted by itself, just a little. Grandpa slammed his hand down on it. Something behind the door slammed back. The whole wall jumped. Mom screamed and ran back to Peter, who was curled on the floor with his hands over his head. The cabin had gone almost completely dark now. Not because the sun had fully set, because something outside had moved in front of every window. Mom realized that slowly. Each window was black. Not nighttime black, blocked black, as if people were standing outside, shoulder to shoulder, looking in. Then one of them leaned close to the glass. In the front window, through the dust and the dim, Mom saw the pale oval of a child's face. No eyes, no mouth, just the shape of a face pressed close. Peter reached up and grabbed her wrist. His hand was freezing. He whispered, "Don't look at them." Mom squeezed her eyes shut. All around the cabin, small hands began tapping on the windows. Not knocking, tapping. Like children asking to be let in from the rain. Grandma came back from the bedroom carrying the baby Bones in both arms. Grandpa followed behind her with the rifle and a face that looked 10 years older than it had when they arrived. He said, "We're going under." Mom opened her eyes. "What?" Grandpa looked at Grandma. "That's where they are, isn't it?" Grandma nodded. "Under the cabin," Grandpa said. "Then that's where we put the baby, and then we leave." Peter laughed weakly from the floor. It was his own laugh this time, but there was no humor in it. He said, "You don't leave after dark." The tapping on the windows stopped. A voice from outside whispered in Mom's voice, "Emily, come see." Mom clamped both hands over her mouth. Another voice, this one sounding like Grandpa, whispered from the back door, "Open up." Then Grandma's voice came from under the floor. "Peter, honey, it's safe now." But Grandma was standing right there. She looked down at the boards beneath her feet, and from beneath them, in her own voice, something began to laugh. Mom said the worst sound she ever heard in that cabin was not the gunshot, or Peter screaming, or the baby crying behind the little door. It was her mother's laugh coming from under the floor, because Grandma was standing right there. She stood in the middle of the main room, holding that little bundle of bones against her chest, with tears running down her face and her own voice laughing beneath her feet. It wasn't a loud laugh. That would have been easier, I think. It was soft and private, almost polite. The kind of laugh adults make when children say something foolish at the dinner table. It rose up between the floorboards in small, breathy bursts, and every time it came, Grandma flinched like someone had tugged a thread inside her body. Grandpa pointed the rifle at the floor. Grandma said, "Don't," he said, "then tell me what to do." She had no answer. The cabin was fully dark by then. The only light came from the lantern on the table, and even that seemed weaker than it should have been. Mom said the flame kept bending sideways, not like there was wind, but like the darkness itself was leaning into it. The tapping at the windows had stopped, which made the silence feel crowded. Peter was still on the floor near the wall, knees pulled up. One hand wrapped around Mom's wrist. She tried to pull away once, just enough to get closer to their mother, but he held on tighter. He whispered, "Don't step where they write." Mom looked down. The black markings on the floor were moving. Not fast, not enough that you'd notice if you looked away and back. But if you stared, you could see the lines shifting in tiny increments, curling over each other, changing shape, connecting one loop to the next. They reminded Mom of worms after rain, except these didn't wriggle randomly. They were trying to become something. Words, maybe, or names. Grandpa must have seen it too, because he backed away until his shoulders hit the wall. Grandma said, "We have to go under the cabin." Peter shook his head. "No." Grandpa looked at him. "Why?" Peter's eyes fixed on the floor. "Because that's where they keep the quiet ones." Nobody knew what that meant. Not then. Grandpa loaded the rifle with hands that were no longer steady. Mom remembered the little clicking sounds as he worked the shells into place. Ordinary sounds, human sounds. They stood out so clearly against the cabin noises that, Years later, she could still hear them in her dreams. He said, "We're getting out first." Grandma told him again that the door wouldn't open. He said, "Then I'll make a new one." He went to the kitchen, grabbed the wood axe from beside the stove, and crossed to the front wall. Mom thought he was going to chop through the door, but instead he went for the wall beside the window, where the boards looked soft from age. He swung the axe. The blade hit the wood and bounced back as if he had struck stone. The shock of it ran up his arms. He dropped the axe and cursed, clutching his wrist. From the walls came a sound like children whispering through their teeth. Grandma said, "It won't let us leave until we finish." Grandpa turned on her. "And what is finishing exactly? You bring us here. You tell me there's a dead baby in the chimney. You tell me there are more under the floor. You tell me the house closes after dark like that's just some regular piece of information a person has. So tell me, what are we finishing?" Grandma looked down at the bundle. "We give Mary back." "To what?" "To them." The whispering in the walls stopped. Mom said every head in that cabin turned toward her grandmother at the same time, even though there were only 4 living people in the room. She felt a tension gather around Grandma from the floor, the windows, the fireplace, and the dark hallway. It was like the whole cabin had been waiting for her to say exactly that. Peter started crying again. Grandpa said, "No." Grandma whispered, "There may not be another way. She's a baby. She's been dead 80 years. She's bones. She's theirs." That was when Mom realized Grandma was not trying to save Mary. She was trying to satisfy the cabin. And maybe that sounds harsh, because I wasn't there, and my mom was only a child when it happened. But when she told me this part, she admitted that, looking back, her mother had already started thinking like the cabin wanted her to think. Not good or evil, just old. Old in the way families get when they've been hiding something for too long. Old in the way guilt gets passed down until it stops feeling like guilt and starts feeling like duty. Grandpa understood it too. He stepped toward Grandma and said, "Give me the bundle." She held it tighter. "No." "Give it to me." "No." He reached for it. The second his hand touched the cloth, every window in the cabin filled with faces. Mom screamed. She couldn't help it. They were children's faces, mostly. Pale shapes pressed to the glass. Some had features. Some didn't. Some looked almost normal except for the eyes, which were too dark or too far apart or not there at all. Others looked half-finished, like clay dolls left in the rain. And behind them, higher up, between the trees, were taller figures, adult figures. They did not press close. They watched from the woods. Mom didn't know why, but those frightened her even more than the children. Peter whispered, "Those are the ones who put them there." Grandma heard him. She turned slowly. "What?" Peter's face was wet with tears. "The children don't keep the cabin," he said. "They're kept by it." Grandpa said, "Who told you that?" Peter pointed under the floor, the quiet ones. Grandma's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then the floorboards in front of the fireplace buckled upward. Not much, just enough to make the nails groan. Something beneath them knocked 3 times. Grandpa forgot the bundle. He grabbed the axe again and started prying at the boards with the blade. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then one plank came loose with a scream of old nails, and a smell came up from the darkness below that made Mom gag. Damp soil, rotten cloth, old bones. Grandma said, "Don't open the floor." Grandpa ignored her. He tore up another board, then another. Under the main room was not a normal crawl space, at least not there. There was a pit. Mom couldn't see how deep it went. The lantern light barely touched the sides. But she could see roots pushing through the walls. And tucked between those roots were scraps of cloth, little shoes, bits of ribbon, and what looked like the broken arm of a porcelain doll. Then she saw the first skull, small, half covered in dirt, facing upward. Grandpa went very still. Grandma began praying under her breath. Peter whispered, "Don't say holy words down there." Grandma stopped. The pit seemed to breathe. That was how Mom described it. The darkness under the floor pulled air into itself and let it out again in long, slow drafts. Each breath smelled worse than the last. Grandpa lowered the lantern. More bones appeared in the light. Not one body, not two, many. Some were clearly children, some were too small to think about. Some were tangled together, as if they had been dropped into the pit without care. Others had been arranged carefully near the roots, with stones around them and scraps of cloth beneath their heads. Mom said she didn't understand death well enough then to understand the full horror of it. She knew bones meant dead people. She knew children weren't supposed to be under houses. But the adult meaning of what she saw came years later, in pieces, and every piece made the memory worse. Grandpa backed away from the hole. His face had gone gray. "What did your family do?" he asked Grandma. She shook her head. "I don't know," but she was crying too hard for Mom to believe her completely. Peter said, "They buried the names." Grandpa turned toward him. "What names?" Peter raised one trembling finger and pointed at the wall beside the fireplace. The black lines on the floor had climbed upward. They were moving over the boards now, up the wall, gathering around a framed sampler that had hung in the cabin for as long as Mom could remember. It was one of those old stitched things with flowers around the edges and a Bible verse in the middle. Grandma had always said one of her ancestors made it. As the black lines reached the frame, the thread inside began to darken. The flowers turned black. The verse disappeared. In its place, names appeared one by one. Mary, Eliza, Samuel, Ruthie, Anna, Thomas, Grace. A name would form, hold for a second, then sink back into the cloth as another appeared. There were so many. Grandma dropped to her knees. Mom said, "Are those the children?" Peter shook his head. "Some," Grandpa said. "Then who are the others?" The answer came from the pit, not in a voice exactly. More like several people whispering together from very far away. "Mothers." The lantern went out. In the dark, Grandma screamed. Grandpa shouted for everyone to stay still. Mom felt Peter grab her and pull her down flat against the floor. She started to ask what he was doing, but he clamped a hand over her mouth. Something moved above them, not around them, above. On the ceiling. Mom heard fingernails ticking across the rafters, slow at first, then faster, circling the room. Dust fell into her hair. A board creaked overhead, then another. Whatever was up there was crawling upside down, following the sound of their breathing. Grandpa struck a match. Peter hissed, "No!" The match flared. For 1 second, Mom saw it. It was clinging to the ceiling directly above Grandma. A woman. Or what had once been one. Her dress hung down in strips. Her hair dangled toward the floor. Her arms and legs were bent wrong, wrapped around the rafters like a spider's. Her face was turned toward Grandpa's little match flame, and in that brief yellow light, Mom saw that her mouth had been sewn shut with black thread. Then the match went out. Grandma whispered, "Ruth." The thing on the ceiling dropped. Grandpa fired blind. Mom heard the shot, heard Grandma scream, heard something slam into the floorboards, and then she heard a sound she could never properly describe. She said it was like a woman trying to scream through a closed mouth. The lantern sparked back to life by itself. The woman was gone. But the bundle of baby bones was no longer in Grandma's arms. It lay at the edge of the open pit. Grandma crawled toward it. Grandpa yelled for her not to, too late. A hand reached up from the pit. It was small, but not a child's hand. The fingers were too long, the joints swollen, the nails black with dirt. It grabbed Grandma by the wrist. Grandma did not scream. She only looked down, almost gently. Then a stitched voice from the pit whispered, "Mother." Grandma said, "I'm not yours." The hand tightened. Peter suddenly lunged forward and grabbed the bundle before it could fall in. Mom screamed at him to stop, but he clutched it to his chest and scrambled backward like an animal. Every face at every window turned toward him. The cabin shook, not like an earthquake. Like something enormous had put both hands on the outside walls and begun to squeeze. Grandpa dragged Grandma away from the pit, but the hand held on. for one awful moment. Mom thought it would pull her mother's arm right out of its socket. Then Grandpa brought the rifle down like a club and smashed the wrist. The hand broke apart into black dirt and little white finger bones. Grandma collapsed against him. Peter stood in the corner with Mary's bones in his arms. He was smiling again. But this time Mom knew, without anyone telling her, that Peter was still in there somewhere, and he was terrified. The stitched-mouth woman's voice came from the loft above them. "Open the little door." Peter answered before anyone could stop him. "No." The cabin went silent. Then the voice said, "Then keep your promise." Peter looked at Mom, really looked at her. For 1 second, he was just her brother again. He mouthed 2 words, "I'm sorry." Then he turned and ran down the hall toward the back bedroom, carrying the baby bones with him. Peter ran toward the back bedroom with Mary's bones in his arms, and for a few seconds, nobody chased him. Mom said that sounds impossible now. A frightened boy runs deeper into a haunted cabin, carrying the remains of a dead baby, after something with a sewn mouth tells him to keep his promise, and nobody moves. But that was exactly what happened. Grandpa was half on the floor, still holding Grandma around the waist after pulling her away from the pit. Grandma looked like she was about to pass out. Mom was frozen beside the wall, too terrified to breathe properly. And the cabin itself had gone silent in a way that felt almost respectful, like even the dead wanted to see what Peter would do. Then the little door in the back bedroom began banging, not scratching anymore. Banging, fast, hard, desperate. The whole wall shook with each hit. Grandpa snapped out of it first. He shoved Grandma toward Mom and shouted, "Stay here." Then he grabbed the rifle and ran after Peter. Grandma tried to follow, but her knees gave out under her. Mom caught her by the shoulders, or tried to, but she was too small to actually hold an adult woman upright. They both half fell against the wall beside the fireplace, only a few feet from the open pit. Mom said she could feel cold air spilling out of that hole and moving over her ankles like water. Grandma grabbed her face with both hands. "Emily," she said, "listen to me." Mom was crying too hard to answer. Grandma shook her. "Listen, if your brother calls for you, don't go," Mom said. "But Dad went." "I know. Then we have to help him." Grandma looked down the hallway. The banging from the little door stopped. For 1 second, the cabin was quiet. Then Grandpa screamed. Mom had never heard her father scream before. Not in anger, not in pain, not like that. It was the kind of scream that takes something permanent out of the person making it. A scream so raw that Mom felt it in her stomach before her ears understood it. She ripped herself away from Grandma and ran. Grandma yelled for her to come back, but Mom ignored her. She ran down the hall toward the back bedroom, slipping once on the dusty floorboards and catching herself against the wall. The bedroom door was open, and the lantern light from the main room barely reached inside. Grandpa was on his knees in front of the closet. The rifle lay on the floor beside him. Peter was gone. The little door was open. Mom said that was the moment she really understood something could be worse than seeing a monster. Seeing an empty space where your brother had just been was worse. The little door did not open into a storage gap. It opened into darkness. At first, Mom thought it was some kind of crawl space, but that didn't make sense. The door was in an inside wall. There should have been boards, studs, maybe the back of the fireplace, anything. Instead, there was a low tunnel that seemed to slope downward, even though that should have been impossible. Grandpa knelt in front of it, with both hands on the frame, staring inside. He was saying Peter's name over and over again, not shouting anymore. Just saying it, "Peter, Peter, Peter." Mom whispered, "Where is he?" Grandpa didn't look at her. He went in. "Why?" Grandpa's mouth trembled. He said it wasn't Mary they wanted. Mom looked at the dark opening. From somewhere far inside it, Peter's voice drifted back. "Emily." Mom took a step forward. Grandpa grabbed her so hard she cried out. "No," he said. Peter's voice came again. "Emily, I'm scared." Mom fought her father's grip. "That's him. Grandpa shook his head. He doesn't call you Emily. That stopped her. Because he was right. Peter called her Em, always. Not Emily. Not unless he was mocking Grandma. From the tunnel came Peter's voice again, softer now. Em! Grandpa's fingers tightened on Mom's shoulder. The voice had corrected itself. That, more than anything, broke something in him. He lunged toward the little door and shoved his upper body into the opening, reaching into the dark with one arm. Mom grabbed his belt, screaming for him not to go in, and for a second she felt him stretching farther and farther into that impossible space. Then something inside grabbed him. Mom knew because his whole body jerked forward. Grandpa shouted and slammed one hand against the closet floor, trying to stop himself from being pulled in. Mom held onto his belt with both hands. Grandma appeared behind her and grabbed Mom around the waist. All three of them were strung together like people in some terrible tug-of-war. With Grandpa halfway inside the little door and something unseen pulling from the other end. Grandpa shouted, "Don't let go," Grandma said. "I won't." Mom was screaming Peter's name. From the tunnel, dozens of small voices whispered back, "Peter, Peter, Peter." Then Grandpa's arm came free. Not because they won, because whatever was holding him let go. He fell backward out of the closet, knocking Mom and Grandma down with him. His right arm was covered in dirt up to the shoulder, and in his fist he held the bundle of bones, Mary's bones. But Peter was still gone. Grandma crawled toward the bundle. Grandpa pulled it away from her. "He took it in," Grandpa said. Then something gave it back. Grandma looked at the little door. Inside the dark, something moved, not toward them, away. A soft shuffling sound, like bare feet dragging over packed earth. Mom said, "Peter?" No answer. Grandpa stood, grabbed the rifle, and aimed into the opening. Grandma said, "Don't shoot." He said, "If I see anything that isn't my son, I'm killing it." From inside the tunnel, a woman's voice whispered, "You already did." Grandpa went still. Mom said she felt those words change the room. Grandma made a small wounded sound. The voice whispered again. Men with shovels, women with towels, babies without names, boys without graves. Grandpa fired into the tunnel. The blast lit the opening for half a second. And in that flash, Mom saw faces. Not one, not even a dozen. The tunnel was full of them. Children crouched shoulder to shoulder along the walls and ceiling, pale knees drawn to their chests, heads tilted in that same listening way. Some had dirt packed into their mouths. Some had black thread stitched across their lips. Some had empty eye sockets. Some looked almost alive, which was somehow worse. And behind them, farther back, stood Peter. He was facing away. A woman's hand rested on his shoulder. Then the gunshot faded, and everything was dark again. Mom ran toward the opening before anyone could stop her. Grandpa caught her around the waist and dragged her back. She kicked and screamed until Grandma slapped her. That sounds awful, and Mom never pretended it wasn't. But she said it brought her back into herself. One second she was trying to crawl into the dark after her brother, and the next she was on the bedroom floor with her cheek burning, and her mother crying over her. Grandma said, "That is not a place for the living," Mom screamed. "He's living." Grandma looked at the door. "For now." Grandpa stood over them, breathing hard through his nose. He said, "Tell me how to get him out." Grandma shook her head. "Tell me. I don't know." "Then guess." Grandma looked at the bundle. "We give them Mary," Grandpa said. "I pulled Mary out." "No," Grandma said. "You pulled out what Peter took in. That doesn't mean they refused her." "Then what does it mean?" Grandma's lips trembled. "It means Peter offered something else." No one said anything after that. Mom said she understood the meaning before the adults did. Or maybe she just accepted it sooner because children are better at believing terrible things when they happen right in front of them. Peter had promised to open the little door. He had opened it. But when he went inside, he had not left Mary there. He had come back without coming back, or something had sent Mary back in his place. Grandpa refused to accept it. He grabbed the axe and started hacking at the closet wall around the little door. This time, the blade bit into the wood, and for a few crazy seconds, Mom thought maybe they could tear the wall apart and find Peter crouched just behind it. But every board Grandpa ripped away showed only more wall. Not studs, not empty space, more wall. Old boards behind newer boards, some burned, some damp, some carved with names, some covered in tiny handprints. He tore through layer after layer until his hands bled and his breath came in ragged gasps. But the little door remained exactly where it was, untouched, open, and dark. Finally, Grandma put a hand on his shoulder. He spun on her with such fury that Mom thought he might hit her. But he didn't. He dropped the axe. Then he sank to the floor and sobbed. That was the second time that night Mom watched an adult become a child. The first had been Grandma with the baby bones. The second was Grandpa in front of the little door. The cabin let him cry for maybe a minute. Then Peter screamed from somewhere below, not from the tunnel. Below, under the floorboards in the main room. Mom bolted before anyone could grab her. She ran back down the hall and into the main room. The open pit gaped in front of the fireplace, breathing cold air. The lantern flame burned low on the table. The windows were still crowded with faces, but they seemed less interested in her now. Peter screamed again, this time from inside the pit. "Dad!" Grandpa came crashing in behind Mom, rifle in hand. He dropped to his knees at the edge. "Peter! Dad! Help me!" Grandpa lowered himself into the hole. Grandma yelled, "No," but he was already going down. The pit was deeper than it looked. Grandpa had to hang from the edge by both hands before his boots found something below. Then he disappeared to his chest, then his shoulders, then only his head and hands remained. Mom grabbed one hand. Grandma grabbed the other. Grandpa looked up at them. "If I say pull, pull," Grandma said. "Please don't," he said. "That's my boy." Then he let go. He dropped into the pit. For a second, nothing happened. Then Mom heard him land below with a grunt. She lay flat on her stomach and looked down. The lantern light should not have reached that far, but somehow it did. Not well, just enough. Grandpa stood among the bones. They rose around him in little mounds, half swallowed by soil and roots. The pit was wider beneath the floor than the opening suggested, stretching out under the cabin like a cellar dug by something that hated straight lines. At the far end, Peter stood barefoot in his pajamas. His back was to the wall of roots. Grandpa started toward him. Mom whispered, "Get him." Peter lifted one hand, not to his father, to Mom. Then he shook his head. Grandpa stopped. "Son?" Peter said. "I opened it." Grandpa said, "It's okay." Peter shook his head again. "No, I opened me." The roots behind Peter moved. They unfolded. That was the only way Mom could describe it. What she had thought was the wall of the pit began to separate into arms, hair, ribs, faces, long fingers, and black thread. A woman's body, or many women's bodies tangled together, pulled itself loose from the dirt behind him. At the center of it was the stitched-mouthed woman, Ruth or not Ruth, with her lips sewn shut and her eyes wide with a grief so deep it looked almost hungry. Grandpa raised the rifle. Peter screamed, "Don't shoot her." Grandpa hesitated. That hesitation was enough. The roots wrapped around his legs. He fired once into the ceiling of dirt. The cabin shook. Mom reached down into the hole, screaming for her father. Grandma grabbed her around the waist. Below, Grandpa hacked at the roots with a knife from his belt. Peter ran forward and tried to pull at them too, sobbing and saying he was sorry over and over again. Then the stitched-mouthed woman bent over Peter. Her sewn lips brushed his ear, and Peter stopped crying. He looked up at Mom. Even from the pit, even in the weak light, she could see his face clearly. It was calm. He said, "Be still, Em." Then all the children in the walls, the floor, the windows, and the woods whispered the same thing. "Be still." The lantern went out again. In the dark, Grandpa screamed. Peter did not. Mom said she does not remember getting out of the cabin. Not properly. That used to bother me when she told the story, because up until that point she remembered things with such terrible clarity. The ladder, the fingers, the black markings, the hand around Grandma's wrist, the faces at the window. All of it was carved into her memory so deeply that she could describe the smell of the room and the angle of the lantern light. But the escape itself came back to her only in pieces. She remembered the dark. She remembered Grandma dragging her backward from the open pit while she kicked and clawed at the floorboards, screaming for Peter and her father until her voice broke. She remembered Grandpa shouting somewhere below, not words, just sound. Then something heavy hit the underside of the cabin floor so hard that every board jumped. The lantern came back on, not all at once. It flickered weakly, showing the room in brief flashes. Flash, the pit. Flash, Grandma's face streaked with tears. Flash, the stitched sampler on the wall, now black with names. Flash, the front door standing wide open. That was the part Mom remembered most clearly afterward. The door had opened. The cabin had let them leave. At least it had let some of them leave. Grandma saw it too. She stopped pulling Mom for half a second, staring at the open doorway like she didn't trust it. Outside was not daylight, obviously. It was night by then, but it was real night. Trees, wind, a thin slice of moon caught above the branches. The ordinary darkness outside suddenly looked safer than the lit room around them. Mom heard Peter's voice from below. M. This time it was his voice. She knew it. She tried to crawl back toward the pit. Grandma hit her, again, harder than before. Mom said she hated her for it. She hated her so much in that moment that even decades later, part of the feeling was still there when she talked about it. But it worked. The pain shocked her long enough for Grandma to lift her under the arms and half carry, half drag her toward the door. Behind them, Grandpa screamed one word. Run. Grandma ran. Mom said they made it down the porch steps and into the weeds before the cabin door slammed shut behind them. The sound was like a coffin lid dropping. The windows went black, not dark, black. Every face disappeared from the glass at the same time, as though the children had turned away from them and toward whatever was still happening inside. Grandma did not stop. She dragged Mom across the clearing, past the truck and toward the old logging road. Mom kept asking where they were going, why they weren't taking the truck, why they weren't helping Dad, why Peter wasn't coming. Grandma didn't answer any of those questions. She just kept saying, "Don't look back." So of course Mom looked back. She said the cabin looked taller than it had before. That sounds ridiculous. And she knew it sounded ridiculous. Buildings don't stretch. Roof lines don't rise. Walls don't breathe. But in her memory, the cabin had become too tall for itself. The chimney leaned like a bent neck. The porch sagged open like a mouth. The words above the door were visible even in the dark. Be still. Then something struck the inside of the front window. Once, twice, a third time. On the third hit, the glass cracked. Mom saw a hand pressed against it. Not a child's hand, her father's. She screamed and tried to run back, but Grandma tackled her in the weeds. Mom fought like an animal. She bit Grandma's arm. She punched her in the chest. She kicked until one of her shoes came off. Grandma held her down and whispered into her ear, "That isn't him anymore." Mom said, "You don't know." Grandma cried against the side of her face. "Yes, I do." The hand behind the broken window slid downward, leaving a dark smear on the glass. Then the cabin went completely still. Grandma got Mom up and forced her toward the truck. For some reason, the engine started. That detail still makes no sense to me. The truck had been sitting there for hours. The keys were in Grandpa's pocket, or should have been. Mom remembered him putting them there when they arrived, because Grandma had wanted to hold them and he refused. Yet when Grandma shoved Mom into the passenger seat and climbed behind the wheel, the keys were already hanging from the ignition. Grandma looked at them for 1 second. Then she started the truck. The engine turned over on the first try. As they backed away, Mom saw someone standing at the edge of the clearing. Peter. He was near the tree line, barefoot, still in his pajamas. His face was dirty. His arms hung loosely at his sides. He looked dazed but alive. Mom screamed his name. Grandma slammed the brakes. For one impossible second, hope came back. Peter took one step toward them, then another. Mom tried to open the door, but Grandma grabbed her coat and held her in place. "Wait," Grandma said. Peter stopped, his head tilted. Behind him, deeper in the trees, another Peter stepped out. Then another, then another. Mom said they came from between the trunks one by one, all wearing the same pajamas, all barefoot, all with the same dirt on their faces and the same loose arms at their sides. 5 Peters, 6, 7, then more. Some were smaller, some were taller. One had no face at all, just a smooth, pale oval under Peter's hair. One walked with its head turned too far to the side. One smiled with a mouth full of black mud. All of them spoke at once. Grandma hit the gas. The truck shot backward so fast it nearly slid into a ditch. Then she turned it around and drove down the logging road without headlights for the first 100 feet because she was too panicked to find the switch. The Peters followed, not running, walking. But somehow they stayed close in the rear window no matter how fast the truck went over the rutted road. Mom kept looking back until Grandma screamed at her not to. The road out of the woods was only 4 miles, but Mom said it felt like it went on for hours. Branches scraped both sides of the truck. The tires slipped in mud. Once, something hit the roof hard enough to dent it inward. Another time, a small hand slapped the passenger side window right beside Mom's face, leaving a print of black dirt on the glass. She did not look. Not that time. She stared at her own knees and repeated "be still" in her head until the words stopped sounding like words. Then, all at once, they were out. The logging road gave way to gravel. The trees thinned. The moonlight widened. The truck bounced onto the county road, and the air changed, like they had driven through some invisible skin and come out the other side. Grandma did not slow down for another 20 minutes. When they finally reached Mr. Voss's place, she drove straight onto his lawn and crashed into a stack of firewood. Mr. Voss came outside with a shotgun and no shirt, shouting before he realized who they were. Then he saw Grandma's face. Then he saw Mom. Then he looked at the empty seats in the truck and stopped shouting. "Mom," said Grandma tried to explain, but none of the words came out right. "Cabin, Peter, the floor, my husband, the children." Mr. Voss must have thought she was hysterical, which she was, but he didn't dismiss her. He got them inside, locked the doors, and called the sheriff. This was before cell phones, so everything took longer. The sheriff didn't arrive until nearly 2 in the morning. 2 deputies came with him. Mr. Voss insisted on going too because he knew the old road, and because, according to Mom, he looked at Grandma in a way that suggested he knew more about the cabin than he wanted to say. Grandma begged them not to go before morning. The sheriff told her that if a man and a boy were missing in the woods, they weren't waiting for sunrise. Mom remembered grabbing the sheriff's sleeve and telling him not to answer if Peter called from the trees. He gave her the kind of look adults give frightened children. Then he patted her hand and said, "We'll bring your daddy and brother back." They did not. At dawn, the sheriff returned with 1 deputy and Mr. Voss. The other deputy was gone. So were Grandpa and Peter. The sheriff's official story, from what Mom learned much later, was that the family had suffered some kind of breakdown at the cabin. He believed Grandpa had injured or killed Peter and fled into the woods. Or maybe Grandma had done something and invented the rest to protect herself. The missing deputy complicated that theory, obviously, but people can make almost any story fit if the alternative is impossible. They found the cabin door locked, not just closed. Locked from the outside. The key was in Grandma's coat pocket. The sheriff broke a window to get in, and when they searched the cabin, there was no open pit in the floor. No black markings, no bones, no baby bundle, no handprints covering the bedroom walls. Nothing. The little door in the closet was there, but it had been nailed shut so long ago that the nail heads were rusted smooth. When one deputy pried it open, there was only a shallow empty space behind it full of dust. Mouse droppings and a few old jars. No tunnel, no Peter, no Grandpa. But they did find one thing. In the loft, on the mattress where Peter used to sleep, someone had written a sentence in the dust. Mom said the sheriff wouldn't let her see it. Grandma saw it though. So did Mr. Voss. Years later, when Mom finally got the courage to ask what it said, Grandma told her. It said, "The boy keeps his promise." The missing deputy was found 3 days later, wandering down a highway almost 30 miles away. He was barefoot. He had no memory of leaving the cabin, no memory of the search, and no memory of where he had been during those 3 missing days. He also had no injuries except for dirt under his fingernails and a black handprint around his right ankle. He quit the sheriff's department the following week and moved out of state before the end of the month. Grandpa and Peter were never found. Officially, the case remained open for years, but nobody really searched after the first month. People looked through the woods, dragged the creek, checked old wells, questioned drifters, and brought dogs up from 2 counties over. The dogs wouldn't go near the cabin. One handler forced his bloodhound onto the porch, and it lay down flat, shaking and urinating on itself until he carried it back to the truck. Eventually, the world did what it always does. It moved on. Grandma did not. Mom said she became 2 people after that. In public, she was a grieving wife and mother, quiet, polite, damaged, but functional enough that people eventually stopped bringing casseroles and stopped lowering their voices when she entered a room. At home, she became obsessed with the cabin, not with going back, never that. She became obsessed with understanding it. She wrote letters to distant relatives. She dug through county records. She visited churches, libraries, courthouses, and cemeteries. She copied names from family Bibles. She collected birth certificates, death notices, land deeds, old newspaper clippings, and stories from elderly cousins who suddenly remembered things their own parents had told them not to repeat. And slowly, she built a history. That was the history my mother gave me at the dining room table after Dad died. She said, "This is the part I didn't know until later." Then she opened the old box again and took out the letters tied with string. The first letter was dated 1891. It was written by a woman named Ruth Bell, the same Ruth who had supposedly given birth at the cabin and returned without her baby. Only according to the letter, Mary had not been stillborn, and Ruth had not given her up willingly. The letter was addressed to her sister. In it, Ruth wrote that their mother had taken the baby after 3 days because the crying was bringing notice. Ruth was weak from the birth and feverish, but she remembered her mother standing at the foot of the bed with the child wrapped in a flour sack. Ruth begged her not to. Her mother said, "A nameless thing cannot shame us." Then she carried Mary out of the room. Ruth never saw her baby alive again. 2 days later, the crying began under the floor. Mom stopped there and looked at me. I remember asking, "So your great-great-grandmother killed the baby?" She said, "Not just Mary." Then she handed me the rest of the letters. And that was when I understood that the cabin wasn't haunted, because one terrible thing happened there. It was haunted because, for almost 40 years, the women in my grandmother's family had used it as a place to make unwanted children disappear. Mom said that was the part that changed the cabin from a ghost story into something much worse. Before the letters, she had been able to think of the cabin as a place where something terrible happened once. A cursed house, maybe. A rotten place with a dead child in the chimney and a door that should never be opened. That was horrifying, obviously, but it was still the kind of horror a person could put inside a box. One baby, one secret, one haunting. But the letters made the box too small. There had been more, many more. I read some of them at the dining room table while my mother watched me. The paper was thin and yellow, and the handwriting changed from letter to letter. Some were written in ink, some in pencil, Some were barely readable because the words had faded or the paper had been damaged by damp. But even when I couldn't make out every sentence, the meaning came through clearly enough. The cabin had not only been a hiding place, it had been a solution. That was the word one of the letters used. Solution. I remember staring at that word for a long time because it felt so clean and practical sitting there on the page, like they were talking about fixing a roof or getting rid of rats in a barn. Not children, not babies, not young mothers sent away in shame and brought back hollow-eyed with empty arms. My mother said her grandmother's family were respectable people in the eyes of their town. Church people, landowners, at least for a while. They donated to the pastor, hosted harvest suppers, and had a reputation for being stern but decent. Their women were known for being quiet, hardworking, and proper. Their men were known for minding their own business and expecting others to do the same. That was how they survived. By looking ordinary, the cabin sat far enough into the woods that nobody accidentally came by. If a daughter, niece, cousin, or servant girl became pregnant when she wasn't supposed to, she could be taken there for her health. That was the phrase that appeared over and over in the letters and family records. For her health. Sometimes she returned after a few months, and people were told she had recovered from nerves. Sometimes she was sent to relatives in another county. Sometimes she married quickly, and nobody asked questions. The children did not come back. Not all of them were killed, or at least that's what my mother believed. A few were probably given away. There were mentions of infants placed elsewhere, though nobody seemed to know where elsewhere was. One letter referred to a baby boy being delivered to a church steps before dawn. Another mentioned a girl sent west with a widowed aunt, but many of them went under the cabin. The first was Mary. After Mary, something changed in the house. Ruth's mother, whose name was Abigail, had apparently taken the baby and suffocated her. The exact method was never written down, thank God. Though one sentence in Ruth's letter said, "She made the little one quiet with the pillow and told me quiet was mercy." I wish I had never read that line, and I'm sorry for repeating it. But it matters. It matters because it explains the phrase, "Be still." It wasn't protection at first, it was commandment. Abigail buried Mary beneath the floor because the winter ground outside was too frozen, and because she didn't want a grave anyone could find. She told Ruth the child had been born wrong, had breathed wrong, had cried wrong, and had died before anyone could help her. Ruth knew better. Mothers know, she wrote. That was another line I remember. Mothers know. 2 nights after Mary was put beneath the cabin, Ruth heard crying under the floorboards. At first, she thought she was losing her mind from fever and grief. Then Abigail heard it too. Then Ruth's brother. Then an old aunt who had come to help clean the cabin before they left. According to the family story, Abigail took this as a sign. Not a warning, a sign. She believed Mary's spirit had stayed because the child belonged there now, that the cabin had accepted the shame and hidden it where the world could not see. Over the years, that belief twisted into something like ritual, not formal ritual, exactly. There were no robes or candles or Latin words, at least not that we found. It was more practical and more horrible than that. The women came, they gave birth. If the child could not be explained, the child was made quiet. Then the floor accepted it, and the family went on. I asked my mother how nobody ever found out. She said people probably did, they just didn't care enough, or they cared but not enough to risk their own reputations, or they suspected but had no proof. Back then, a young woman disappearing for a season and returning pale and thin was not as unusual as it should have been. Babies died all the time. Records were incomplete. Shame did half the work before violence did the rest. Besides, the family controlled the story. A stillbirth, a fever, a child sent away, a girl gone to help relatives, a servant dismissed, a cousin who wasn't right in the head. Words are useful like that when the people saying them have power. The strangest part was that after a while, the cabin seemed to demand it. That was where the letters became less like history and more like madness. By the early 1900s, Abigail was dead, Ruth was nearly mad herself, and the cabin had passed through the family to another branch. But the rules remained. Do not answer. Do not look through the windows after dark. Do not whistle in the woods. Do not speak names below the floor. Keep the house quiet. Bring what must not be known. One letter from 1913 described a woman named Eliza who stayed at the cabin after giving birth to a boy. Her family had arranged for the baby to be adopted by a childless couple in a town 2 days away. That was the plan, and for once it seemed almost merciful compared with everything else. But the night before the couple arrived, the cabin began knocking. 3 times under the bed, 3 times under the stove, 3 times beneath the cradle. Eliza wrote that her mother told her the house had grown hungry for what it was owed. She refused to hand over the child. She held him all night while the walls whispered around her, and in the morning, she found the cradle full of black soil, even though the baby had never left her arms. Eliza ran. She made it as far as the creek before hearing her own mother calling from the trees. She answered. Her letter ended there. A newspaper clipping said she was found 2 days later, wandering naked and feverish on the county road, holding a bundle of leaves she insisted was her son. The actual baby was never found. My mother said that was when the family began to understand the cabin was no longer just a place they used. It had become a thing with its own appetite. Or maybe, and this is what she believed, the buried children had become so tangled together with the guilt of the family that there was no separating one from the other. The children wanted names. The mothers wanted forgiveness. The house wanted quiet. And the living kept feeding all 3. I remember asking why nobody burned it down. Mom gave me this tired little smile. People tried. According to Grandma's research, at least 2 men attempted to destroy the cabin before my grandfather ever came into the picture. The first was Ruth's surviving brother, a man named Samuel Bell. He came back to the cabin sometime around 1902, after Ruth died in an asylum. He had always believed Mary's death destroyed his sister, and by then he had heard enough whispers from cousins to suspect the cabin had been used more than once. He brought kerosene. He soaked the porch, the curtains, the beds, and the floorboards. Then he lit a match. The fire burned everything except the cabin. That was how one letter described it. The grass burned, the woodpile burned, Samuel's coat caught fire. Even a nearby pine went up badly enough that the top half of it died. But the cabin itself only smoked, and when the smoke cleared, the boards were blackened but whole. Samuel lived, but his hands were ruined. For the rest of his life, his fingers curled inward, like he was holding an invisible child. The second attempt happened in 1936. A cousin named Joseph came with dynamite stolen from a quarry job. He set charges under the porch and along the back wall. Nobody knew exactly what happened after that, because Joseph went alone. People heard the explosion from miles away. When they reached the cabin the next morning, Joseph was gone. The cabin's back wall had one new crack in it. That was all. 3 days later, Joseph's wife found his boots lined neatly outside their bedroom door, toes pointed toward the bed. Inside each boot was a handful of dirt and one baby tooth. He was never seen again. So no, they did not burn the cabin down. They did not tear it apart. They stayed away when they could and returned when they thought they had to. That pattern went on until my grandmother inherited the land. By then, the worst of the old practices had stopped. At least, that's what Mom believed. The world had changed. Hospitals were more common. Records were harder to hide. Women had more options, though not nearly enough. The cabin was no longer needed in the same way, but need and habit are cousins. Grandma grew up hearing that the cabin had to be visited. Not often, not for long, just enough to keep it remembered. Her mother told her the family owed the place attention. If nobody came, the whispers would spread outward. If nobody kept the rules, the dead would come looking. Grandma believed that. Or maybe she didn't at first, but she believed it by the time Mom and Peter were born. That was why she insisted on the summer visits, not because she loved the cabin, because she feared what might happen if she abandoned it. My grandfather never knew the full history. Grandma told him only that the cabin was old, strange, and important to her family. She taught him the rules slowly, pretending they were superstition. Don't answer if you hear your name. Don't look out after dark. Don't leave food outside. Don't let the children play under the porch. He thought it was ridiculous. Until the night in the loft. Until Peter answered. That was the tragedy of it, according to Mom. Peter wasn't chosen because he was special. He was chosen because he was open. He had answered once. He had looked. He had promised. The cabin had learned him the way a stray dog learns who leaves scraps by the back door. And when Grandma brought him back, the cabin took what it believed it was owed. I asked Mom what happened to Grandpa. She looked at the letters for a long time. Then she said, "We don't know." I said, "But you heard him scream." "Yes, and he didn't come back." "No, so he died." She folded her hands. "Probably, that word bothered me, probably. There are some situations where you want uncertainty, a missing person, a lost hiker, a child who vanishes but might still be alive somewhere. People cling to probably not dead because the alternative is unbearable. But with my grandfather, probably dead felt worse. Because the other possibility was that the cabin kept him too. Mom said Grandma believed he died protecting Peter. That was the version she told herself when she could still bear to talk about it. My grandfather went into the pit, tried to love his son, and whatever was down there killed him. But years later, when Grandma's mind started slipping, she said other things. She said Mom's father was under the roots. She said he held the door shut from the wrong side. She said he still tells the boy to run. And once, during the final year of her life, Grandma woke from a nap screaming and told my mother, "Your father is tired of being still." That was one of the reasons Mom never went back. After the disappearance, Grandma kept the cabin key but never used it again. She continued researching until she died, but she did it from a distance. She kept boxes of documents in closets. She wrote down everything she remembered. She drew maps of the cabin from memory and marked places where bones had been seen or heard or guessed at. She also made Mom promise 3 things: never sell the land, never burn the cabin, never bring a child there. Mom made the promise. Then Grandma added one more thing: if it starts calling from home, take the key back. Mom asked what that meant. Grandma said, "You'll know." For years, nothing happened. Mom grew up. She moved away. She met my dad. She became a nurse. She had me. She kept the old key in the kitchen drawer, but never touched it unless she was moving it from one house to another. She told herself the cabin was over. Not gone, but contained. Then my dad died. And 3 months after his funeral, my mother woke at 2:13 in the morning to 3 knocks from inside her hall closet. She ignored them. The next night, they came again. 3 knocks. Then her own brother's voice, unchanged after all those years, whispered from behind the closet door, "Em, I'm cold." That was why she gave me the box. That was why she finally told me everything. And that was why, 2 weeks later, my mother asked me to drive her to the cabin in the woods. When my mother asked me to drive her to the cabin, I honestly thought she had lost her mind. I don't say that lightly. I don't mean she seemed emotional or dramatic or overwhelmed by grief. I mean that, after sitting at her dining room table for hours while she told me about Peter, Grandpa, Mary, Ruth, the pit, the little door, the missing deputy, and the knocks in the closet, my first normal human reaction was that my mother was having some kind of breakdown. And I hated myself for thinking it. Because she wasn't ranting. She wasn't wild-eyed. She wasn't waving her hands around or insisting that invisible children were standing in the room with us. If anything, she was too calm. That made it worse. She told the story the way a nurse tells a family that surgery didn't go well. Gentle voice, simple words, no wasted emotion. But the story itself was insane. So part of me kept looking for a way to make it all fit into ordinary life. Maybe Grandma had been mentally ill. Maybe Peter and Grandpa really did disappear in the woods, and the cabin story was how a traumatized child processed it. Maybe the letters were real, but the haunting was not. Maybe the knocks in Mom's closet were pipes, or mice, or the house settling after the temperature dropped. I wanted one of those explanations to work. I really did. Then, while Mom was waiting for my answer, 3 knocks came from the hall closet. Not loud, not theatrical. Just 3 soft knocks. Tap, tap, tap. I felt the blood leave my hands. Mom did not turn around. She only closed her eyes. "That's the 3rd night," she said. I stared down the hallway. The closet door was closed. It had always stuck a little at the top, and I could see the familiar warped edge where the paint had chipped from years of being shoved too hard. Nothing about it looked supernatural. That was what made the sound so awful. It came from something ordinary, a closet, a place where she kept coats, wrapping paper, old shoes, and the vacuum cleaner. Then the knock came again. Tap, tap, tap. I stood up before I knew I was going to. Mom whispered, "Don't open it." I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because my body wanted to reject the situation completely. A grown man standing in his dead father's house while his mother told him not to open a closet because his missing uncle might be on the other side. I said, "Mom." She shook her head. "Daniel, listen to me." The closet door creaked just slightly. Not opening, settling maybe. That's what I told myself. Then a voice whispered from behind it, "M." I had never heard Peter's voice, obviously. There were no home videos from my mother's childhood, no recordings, not even many photographs. So I cannot tell you that the voice sounded like my missing uncle. I can only tell you what it did to my mother. She folded in on herself. That's the only way to put it. Her face collapsed. Her shoulders curled forward. One hand went to her mouth, and for a second she looked 8 years old again, sitting in a dark cabin while something climbed the ladder. The voice whispered again, "M, I'm cold." I wanted to run to the closet. I wanted to throw it open and prove there was nothing there. I wanted it to be a prank, or a radio, or an animal, or some stupid mechanical thing caught in the wall. I wanted reality back. But my mother reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were ice cold. "Don't answer," she said. So I didn't. For maybe a full minute, neither of us moved. The closet stayed shut, then the voice behind it changed. It became my father's voice. Not kind of like him, not close. My father. "Danny," it whispered, "help your mother." I almost answered. That is the most honest thing I can say. The word "dad" rose in my throat so fast I felt it hit my teeth. Every part of me wanted to say it. It was automatic, instinctive, grief doing what grief does, reaching for anything that looks like the person it lost. Mom dug her nails into my wrist, hard. I closed my mouth. The thing behind the closet laughed softly in Peter's voice. Then it was quiet. We sat there until sunrise. Neither of us slept. Neither of us opened the closet. When morning came, Mom finally let go of my wrist. There were little crescent marks where her nails had broken the skin, she said. "Now you understand why we have to go," I said. "No, I really don't." She looked exhausted. "If it's calling from here, then it's no longer contained." I asked what that meant. She said she didn't know exactly, but Grandma had warned her. If the cabin began calling from home, the key had to go back. That was the rule. Maybe the family had broken something by staying away too long. Maybe Dad's death had weakened her somehow. Maybe grief was another kind of open door. She didn't know. She only knew the knocks had started and the voices were getting stronger. The first night, it had only knocked. The second night, it had used Peter. The third night, it had used my father. I told her we should call someone. She asked who. I had no answer. Police? And say what? My dead father and missing uncle were whispering from my mother's closet. A priest? We weren't Catholic. A paranormal investigator? The thought alone made me feel like an idiot. A therapist? That might have helped if the closet hadn't spoken in my dad's voice while I was sitting right there. So I did the stupidest thing I have ever done. I agreed to drive her. Not that day. Mom said we had to leave early in the morning and reach the cabin well before noon. She said under no circumstances should we be near that place after dark. I asked why we couldn't just mail the key or throw it into a lake or bury it or melt it down. She said Grandma had tried burying it once. It turned up in Peter's shoe. That ended the discussion. We spent the rest of the day preparing in a way that felt both ridiculous and deadly serious. Mom packed the key, Grandma's letters, a flashlight, 2 lanterns, bottled water, gloves, a first aid kit, and a small garden trowel. I packed things that made more sense to me. A crowbar, a hatchet, a hunting knife my dad used to take fishing, my phone charger, and a can of wasp spray because I didn't own a gun and apparently my brain decided wasp spray was the next best thing. Mom saw it and almost smiled. Almost. Then she said, "None of that will help if you answer." I said, "I won't." She looked at me. "You almost did." I hated that she was right. That night, we slept in the living room with every light on. Or tried to sleep anyway. Mom took the couch. I took the recliner. The hallway closet stayed shut. I dragged a heavy chair in front of it, which Mom told me was pointless but allowed anyway. At 2:13, 3 knocks came from inside the closet. The chair in front of the door slid backward an inch. Mom and I sat up at the same time. The closet whispered in Dad's voice again. "Danny." I covered my ears. It did not help. "Danny, I'm not angry." That almost broke me. My dad and I hadn't been fighting when he died or anything like that, but grief has a way of inventing unfinished business. There are always things you didn't say. Always moments you wish you had handled differently. Always some stupid memory that becomes important only after the person is gone. The voice knew exactly where to press. "I know you were scared at the hospital," it whispered. I was too. I started crying. Quietly at first, then harder. Mom crossed the room and put both hands over my hands, pressing them tighter against my ears. She leaned close and whispered, "That is not your father," the closet said. "Ask her what she left in the cabin." Mom froze. I felt it. Her hands stiffened against mine. The voice behind the door laughed. "Not Peter, not Dad. Something else. Ask her," it said. Then the knocking stopped. The next morning, Mom pretended nothing had happened. That made me angrier than the voice. While we loaded the car, I asked her what it meant. She said, "It lies." I said, "That's not what I asked." She put a bag in the trunk and wouldn't look at me. It tells the truth when the truth hurts more. That was the first time I suspected my mother had not told me everything. The drive north took almost 5 hours. For the first hour, neither of us said much. We passed suburbs, gas stations, strip malls, and all the normal places that make supernatural horror feel embarrassing. It's one thing to talk about a haunted cabin in a dark house at night. It's another thing to sit at a red light behind a plumbing van while your mother holds an old key in her lap like it's a loaded gun. Eventually, I asked what exactly we were supposed to do when we got there. Mom said, "Return the key. To the cabin, to the door." "What door?" She looked out the window. "The little one." I said, "Absolutely not." She didn't answer. "No," I said again. "You told me Peter opened that door and disappeared. So unless the plan is to do the exact thing the ghost house wants us to do, we are not opening it." Mom rubbed the key tag between her thumb and forefinger. The door may already be open. That was not comforting. About 3 hours in, we stopped for gas and coffee. Mom went inside to use the restroom while I filled the tank. It was a bright, cold morning, the kind that makes the whole world look too sharp. I remember standing there with the pump handle in my hand, watching a family in a minivan argue over snacks, and thinking there was still time to turn around. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. I looked toward the gas station windows and saw her still inside near the restroom hallway. The text said, "Don't take her back there." I stared at it. Then another text came through. "She left me under the floor." My stomach dropped. I looked back through the window. Mom was at the counter now, paying for coffee. Her phone was not in her hand. A third text appeared. I kept the door shut. Then a fourth. "I am tired." I looked down at the sender. "Mom." I opened our conversation thread, and the messages were there, real, delivered from her number. Then Mom came out carrying 2 coffees and a bag of trail mix. I held up my phone. She saw my face and stopped walking. What happened, I showed her. She nearly dropped the coffee. Her phone was in her purse, dead. It had died the night before, and she had forgotten to charge it. She took it out and pressed the power button, but nothing happened. I said, "Mom, what did you leave in the cabin?" She looked toward the highway. For a second, I thought she was going to lie. Then she said, "A ribbon." I stared at her. "What?" "When I was little, I had a blue ribbon. I wore it in my hair the last time we went there." "What does that have to do with anything?" Her voice went flat. "Peter was holding it when he disappeared." I didn't understand. She opened the passenger door but didn't get in. "I told you he opened the little door," she said. "I told you he carried Mary's bones into it. I told you he was taken." "Yeah, I didn't tell you why." The gas pump clicked off behind me. Mom looked at me over the roof of the car. That night in the cabin, Peter didn't promise them himself. "I waited," she said. "He promised them me." For a few seconds, the whole world seemed to go quiet. Then a horn blared somewhere near the pumps, and the ordinary world came rushing back so hard I felt dizzy. I said, "What does that mean?" Mom got into the car. "It means I need to return what he gave them." I got in too, but I didn't start the engine. "No, explain." She stared straight ahead. "When we were kids," after he first answered, "Peter told me the girl under the cabin wanted to play a game. I thought he was trying to scare me. He said she wanted a name, but he wouldn't give her his, so he gave her mine." I said nothing. Mom continued. "That was why it called me so often. That was why it could sound like me. Peter thought it was a joke at first. Then he got scared and promised he'd bring me to the little door so they could give it back." I felt cold, but he didn't? No. When he went in, he took my ribbon instead. It was the only thing of mine he had. I think he tried to trick them, or save me, or both. She looked down at the key, and maybe it worked for a while. I said, "For a while." Mom's eyes filled with tears. The voices from the closet aren't calling me Emily anymore. I remembered the texts. I remembered Dad's voice. "Danny, help your mother. Ask her what she left in the cabin." Mom looked at me and said, "Last night, it learned your name." I wanted to turn the car around. I wanted to drive home, burn the key, throw her box of letters into the nearest river, change my name, move to another country, and never say the word cabin again. Instead, I started the engine, because fear is strange like that. Sometimes it makes you run. Sometimes it makes you obey the shape of a story that started long before you were born. We drove the rest of the way mostly in silence. The main roads became smaller roads. The smaller roads became cracked 2-lane blacktop. Then came gravel, then dirt. The trees thickened. Houses disappeared. My phone signal dropped from 3 bars to 1, then none. Mom guided me from memory and from one of Grandma's hand-drawn maps. Turn after the collapsed barn. Stay left at the creek. Ignore the road with the rusted gate. Don't stop if you see anyone walking. I laughed at that last one because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. About a mile from the old logging road, I saw a man standing beside the trees. He was tall, maybe 6 foot something, wearing a dark coat and no hat, despite the cold. He stood with his back to us, facing the woods. As we passed, he turned his head, not his body, just his head. "Too far," Mom said. "Don't slow down." I pressed the gas. In the rearview mirror, the man was gone. 20 minutes later, we reached the entrance to the logging road. The old track was narrower than I expected, half swallowed by weeds and low branches. If Mom hadn't pointed it out, I would have driven right past it. There was no sign, no mailbox, nothing to suggest there was property back there at all. I stopped the car. The engine idled. Neither of us moved. Then, from somewhere deep in the trees, a child's voice called my name, Daniel. Mom closed her eyes. I put the car in drive, and we turned onto the road to the cabin. The road to the cabin was worse than I expected. Calling it a road almost feels generous. It was more like an old wound in the woods that the trees had been trying to close for decades. Branches scraped both sides of the car. Weeds slapped under the bumper. Twice, I had to stop and get out to move fallen limbs. And each time I did it, Mom watched the tree line like she expected someone to step out of it wearing Peter's face. The first time I got out, I tried to make a joke. Something stupid like, "This would be a lot easier if your cursed murder cabin had valet parking." Mom didn't laugh. I didn't either after a second. The woods were too quiet. That sounds like a cliché, I know. Every creepy woods story says the woods were too quiet. But there's a reason people keep saying it. Real woods are never silent. There are birds, bugs, leaves, little animals, distant water, wind moving high up where you can't feel it on the ground. These woods had none of that. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just the engine ticking, my shoes in the dirt, and Mom breathing through the open window like she was trying not to cry. The second time I got out, I found a child's shoe beside the road. It was small, old-fashioned, and black with mud. Not a sneaker. More like something from an antique photograph, with a little buckle and a rounded toe. It sat on top of a flat stone, perfectly centered, toes pointed toward the car. I froze when I saw it. Mom leaned out the window and said, "Daniel." I looked at her. "Get back in the car." I said, "It's just a shoe. Don't touch it." I don't know why, but that made me want to touch it more. Not because I'm some brave idiot who needs to prove things. I was scared out of my mind. But there was something about the shoe that pulled at my attention. It looked so small and sad sitting there alone that part of me wanted to pick it up and turn it over, as if doing that might reveal a name written inside or some explanation for why it had been left there. Then, from the trees behind me, a little girl whispered, "That one was mine." I got back in the car, fast. Mom didn't say anything. She didn't have to. After that, I drove with both hands clamped around the steering wheel and my eyes fixed on the road. Every now and then, something pale would appear between the trees and vanish before I could look directly at it. Once, I saw what looked like a woman in a white dress standing knee-deep in ferns. Another time, I saw a boy crouched on a low branch watching us pass with his head tilted sideways. I did not slow down. I did not answer. I just drove. Mom held the cabin key in her lap the whole time. Her thumb moved over the leather tag again and again. North cabin door. I asked her why it said north cabin door if there was only one cabin. She looked at the tag like she had forgotten the words were there. "There used to be another door," she said. "Where?" "On the north side." I said, and they boarded it over before I was born." "Why?" Mom swallowed. "Because that was the door they used to carry things out." I waited for her to explain. She didn't. The road curved sharply around a huge pine, dipped into a shallow creek bed, then climbed again. My car scraped bottom hard enough that I thought for sure we were stuck, but the tires caught, and we lurched forward through the mud. Then the trees opened, not gradually, all at once. 1 second we were in a narrow tunnel of branches, and the next we were in a clearing. The cabin stood at the far end. It looked almost exactly like the Polaroid. That was the first thing that scared me. Not that it looked worse, that would have been normal. The photo was decades old. I expected collapse, rot, a roof caving in, windows broken by weather or vandals, nature chewing it to pieces. But the cabin was still standing. The porch sagged on one side. Moss grew over the roof. The chimney leaned slightly. The wood had gone dark with age and damp, but it was intact in a way that made no sense. It looked neglected, yes, but not abandoned. More like someone had been maintaining it badly on purpose. The windows were black. The door was shut. Above it, carved deep into the lintel, were the words, "Be still." I stopped the car at the edge of the clearing. The engine sounded obscenely loud. Mom whispered, "Turn it off." I didn't want to. I know that sounds ridiculous, but the running engine felt like a lifeline. As long as it was on, we could leave. As long as it was on, the car belonged to the modern world. Gasoline mechanics, roads, insurance payments, things that made sense. Mom said, "Daniel." I turned the key. The engine died. The silence rushed in. For a while, neither of us opened our doors. I stared at the cabin, waiting for something to happen. A face in the window. A knock. Peter's voice, my father's voice. Anything. Nothing did. That almost made it worse. Finally, Mom said, "We need to be quick." "What exactly are we doing?" "We put the key where it belongs." "The little door?" "Yes." "And the ribbon?" She closed her eyes. "If it's still there." I looked at her. "You don't even know if it is." "No, Mom." She opened her eyes and looked at me with such exhaustion that I lost some of my anger. "I have been trying not to know anything about this place since I was 8 years old," she said. "I'm doing the best I can." That shut me up. We got out. The air in the clearing felt colder than the road behind us. Not by much, but enough that I noticed immediately. It had that damp mineral smell you get in basements, mixed with pine needles and wood smoke, even though no fire had burned there in decades as far as I knew. I took the crowbar from the trunk. Mom saw it and shook her head but didn't argue. We walked toward the porch. Halfway there, I noticed the ground. It was uneven in strange places. Small rises and depressions dotted the clearing, most of them covered with moss, weeds, or dead leaves. At first, I thought they were rocks or roots pushing up through the soil. Then I realized some of them were too regular, too small, too grave-shaped. I stopped. Mom stopped too. She didn't look down. "How many?" I asked. She said, "Don't count." That was another rule, apparently. Don't count the mounds. Don't count the knocks. Don't count the voices if more than one speaks at once. Numbers gave attention shape. That was how Grandma had written it in one of her notes, according to Mom. If you counted them, you made room for them in your head. So I didn't count. But there were a lot. We climbed the porch steps. The boards groaned but held. Up close, the words above the door looked freshly cut. Not clean exactly. The edges were rough and dark, like the cuts had been reopened with a dirty knife. I could see little curls of pale wood inside some of the letters. "Be still." Mom lifted the key. Her hand shook so badly that she missed the keyhole twice. I wanted to tell her to let me do it, but something stopped me. Maybe pride. Maybe the sense that this was between her and the door. Either way, she got it on the third try. The lock turned. Inside the cabin, something knocked 3 times. Mom froze. I whispered, "Do we still go in?" Her face said no. Her hand opened the door anyway. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not exactly. It smelled like old rain trapped in wood, cold ash, and the inside of a jar that had been sealed too long. Under that was a sweetness that made my stomach turn, like flowers left in dirty water. The main room looked almost empty. There was a table near the window, an iron stove in the kitchen area, a collapsed rocking chair beside the fireplace, and a ladder leading up to the loft. Dust covered everything. Leaves had blown in under the door. A squirrel or raccoon had left droppings in one corner. Normal decay. That was the trick of it. The cabin did not look like a mouth to hell when we stepped inside. It looked like an old family property that needed repairs. That normalness made every story my mother told feel suddenly fragile, like maybe fear and grief had dressed up an abandoned building in nightmares. Then I saw the floor. There were black markings between the boards, faint but there. Lines sunk into the cracks like old ink. Mom saw them too. She whispered, "Don't step on them." That made crossing the room almost impossible. The lines looped everywhere, broken by age and dust, but still visible enough to suggest a pattern. We moved slowly, placing our feet only on boards that looked clean. I kept expecting the markings to shift like they had in Mom's story, but they stayed still. For the first minute, anyway. The fireplace was on our left. The back hallway was straight ahead. The little bedroom door stood open. The loft ladder was to my right. I did not look up. That was deliberate. I could feel the loft above me the way you feel someone standing too close behind you. Every instinct I had said something was watching from up there, looking down through the gap in the floor. Mom whispered, "Daniel." I turned. She pointed to the kitchen window. Written in the dust on the inside of the glass were 4 words. Not with a finger, with something smaller. A child's fingertip maybe, or a twig, or a bone. It said, "He learned you too." My mouth went dry. I stepped back and the board under my right foot groaned. Mom looked down sharply. I had stepped on one of the black lines. At first, nothing happened. Then the line moved. It curled around the edge of my shoe like a living thread. I jerked my foot back so hard I almost fell. Mom grabbed my sleeve and pulled me away. The black line lifted from the floor for half an inch, stretching after my shoe like tar, then snapped back into the crack between the boards. From somewhere under the cabin, a child giggled. Mom said, "We need to hurry." We moved toward the hallway. That was when the front door swung shut behind us. Not slammed, swung, slowly, politely. The lock clicked. I turned around and stared at it. Mom kept walking, I said. "The door just locked." "I know. Mom, don't panic." That was such an absurd thing to say that I almost lost it right there. But then we heard my father's voice from the loft. "Danny, don't go back there." I stopped breathing. Mom turned to me with panic in her eyes and put one finger to her lips. The voice above us sighed. It was a perfect imitation of Dad when he was tired. "Listen to your mother for once." My throat tightened. I stared at the floor. Not up. Do not look. Do not answer. The loft boards creaked. Something moved overhead. Slow. Heavy. Too heavy to be a child. Mom stepped closer to me and whispered, so softly I barely heard. "Walk." We walked. Every board felt like a decision. Behind us, the thing in the loft crossed to the ladder. One rung creaked. Mom's face crumpled. Another rung. Then another. Whatever was coming down, it was doing it slowly. Like it knew we knew. We reached the hallway. The bedroom door waited at the end, half open, exactly as Mom had described it. I could see the iron bed frame through the gap, the cracked mirror, the closet. And from inside that closet came a whisper. Not Dad, not Peter. My own voice. "Mom, I'm scared." I felt Mom stop beside me. The thing behind us reached the bottom of the ladder. I did not turn around. My voice whispered again from the closet. "Mom, help me." Her hand found mine. For 1 second, I understood the trap so completely that it made me sick. It had learned me, yes, but it wasn't calling to me with my voice. It was calling to her. I squeezed her hand hard enough to hurt. She squeezed back. Then we walked into the bedroom. The room was smaller than I expected. Maybe because the story had made it feel enormous. In reality, it was just an old bedroom with bad wallpaper, a rusted bed frame, and a window so dirty it barely admitted light. But the walls were covered in handprints, faint ones, old ones, pressed into dust, grime, and peeling paper, all pointing toward the closet. The closet door was open. Inside, low to the floor, was the little door. It was smaller than I imagined. That made it worse. A tiny door in a normal wall. The kind of thing a child might crawl through. The kind of thing no adult should ever open. The words carved into it were still there. No names below. Mom knelt in front of it. I stood behind her with the crowbar raised like that would matter. From the main room came footsteps. The thing from the loft was walking toward the hallway. "Mom took out the key," I whispered. "Please be quick." She put the key into the little door's lock. It turned by itself. The door opened an inch. Cold air poured out. And from the darkness behind it, Peter whispered, "You brought him instead." Peter whispered, "You brought him instead." And my mother made a sound I had never heard from her before. It was not a scream. It was not a sob. It was this broken little breath, the kind a person makes when something inside them gives way, but their body is too tired to fall apart properly. The little door had opened only an inch, but the cold pouring out of it was unreal. It ran across the bedroom floor in a low draft and curled around my ankles like water. The handprints on the walls darkened as it passed them, as if the cold was waking them up. I stood behind Mom with the crowbar raised, staring into that narrow black opening, and every rational part of me understood that I should drag her away. We had done enough. We had come to the cabin. We had brought the key. We had opened the door. Whatever bargain she thought she was completing was obviously not going the way she hoped, and any sane person would have grabbed her and run. But the problem with fear is that it doesn't always make you act. Sometimes it makes you wait for instructions. So I stood there like an idiot while something wearing my uncle's voice spoke from behind a door that should not have led anywhere. Mom said, "Peter." The second she said his name, the whole cabin inhaled. That is the only way I can describe it. The walls pulled inward. The floorboards groaned. Dust lifted from the bed frame, the dresser, the closet shelf, everything. A cold breath moved past us and into the little door, taking her voice with it. I grabbed her shoulder. "Mom, don't." She didn't look back at me. From behind the little door, Peter laughed softly. Not cruelly, sadly. "You still answer too easy, Em." Mom covered her mouth. But it was too late. The footsteps from the main room stopped at the bedroom doorway. I could feel something standing behind us. I didn't turn around. Every cell in my body wanted to, which is exactly why I didn't. Instead, I looked down at the floor in front of me and saw a shadow stretch across the boards. It was tall, too tall. It bent at the ceiling. Mom saw it too. Her eyes dropped to the shadow, and for a second I thought she was finally going to panic. But she just reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something I hadn't seen her pack. A strip of blue ribbon. It was faded, almost gray, frayed at both ends, and creased from being folded for a long time. I stared at it. "You said Peter had it." Mom whispered, "He did." "Then where did you get that?" She finally looked at me. From the box, I remembered the quilt square, the locket, the letters, the Polaroids. I did not remember the ribbon. Mom said, "My mother found it in the mailbox 3 days after Peter vanished." Something behind us shifted. The floor creaked under its weight. A voice in my father's voice said, "Emily, that's not yours anymore." Mom closed her eyes. The voice was coming from right behind me. Not the hallway, not the main room, right behind me. I could smell damp wool and cold ashes. I held the crowbar so tightly my hands hurt. Dad's voice whispered near my ear, "Danny, look at me. I almost did. God help me. I almost did." It was so close, so familiar. That exact tired warmth in his voice. The little gravelly edge he had when he'd just woken up or had been working outside. I could even hear the way he shaped my name. Not Daniel like Mom did when she was serious, but Danny. I stared at the wall. The handprints there had begun to move, not across the wall, out of it. Tiny indentations pushed from beneath the wallpaper, pressing forward as if small hands were trapped just behind the surface. The paper stretched around their fingers. Some pressed flat, some scratched. Some opened and closed like they were trying to grab the air. Mom held the ribbon toward the little door. "I brought back what was mine," Peter whispered. "No." Her hand shook. "You took it to save me." "No, you did." "No, Em." The cold became worse. The little door opened another inch. For one awful second I saw an eye in the gap. Not Peter's. Not human. It was too low to the floor, looking up at us from the dark, large, wet, and pale, with no color in the iris. Then it slid away. Peter's voice came again, closer. I took it because I was scared. Mom lowered the ribbon slightly. The thing behind us laughed in Dad's voice. Peter said, "I told them your name. I told them you were quiet. I told them you'd come if they called nice enough. I told them you'd fit through the little door because you were smaller than me." Mom started crying silently. Peter continued, "I was mad at you. You told Dad about the creek. You told him I went past the stones. I was mad, so I gave them your name." "Stop," Mom whispered. I didn't know what they were. I said stop. I thought they were kids. Her face crumpled. "I know." "No," Peter said. "You don't. You made me good in your head." The little door opened another inch. The room smelled suddenly of wet dirt. I wasn't good, Em. I gave them you. Then when they came to collect, I got scared and gave them the ribbon instead. Mom shook her head. You were a child. So were they. That shut her up. Behind us, Dad's voice said, children can still open doors. I heard the floorboard creak closer. The shadow moved over me. I could see it now on the closet wall. The figure behind us had bent its head down toward mine. The shadow of its hand rose slowly, fingers long and jointed like branches. Mom looked past me. Her eyes widened. She whispered, Daniel, be still. The hand settled on my shoulder. The cold went straight through my shirt, through my skin, into the bone. It took everything in me not to swing the crowbar, not to scream, not to twist away. I stood there with my teeth clenched so hard my jaw clicked. Dad's voice whispered, I missed you, son. I cried. I didn't answer. The hand on my shoulder tightened. Not painfully, almost lovingly. That was worse. Mom looked at the little door again. What do you want? The cabin answered. Not Peter, not Dad, not the child from the woods. The cabin itself answered in a layered whisper that came from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, the closet, and the dark under the little door all at once. Names. Mom said, you have names. On the sampler in the main room, or maybe in my mind I heard threads pulling tight. The whisper said, not all. I thought about Grandma's research, the letters, the gaps, the babies placed elsewhere, the children under the floor, the mothers, the shame, all the things not written down because writing them would make them real. Mom said, I brought the letters. The little door opened another inch. Peter whispered, read them below. Mom said, no. The hand on my shoulder squeezed, my knees almost buckled. Dad's voice whispered, Danny can read them. That was the moment I understood. Not completely, but enough. The cabin had learned my name at my mother's house. It had called me from the trees. It had written about me in the kitchen dust. And now it had its hand on my shoulder while asking my mother to read the letters below. It didn't want her. Not anymore. It wanted the next person who could carry the story. That sounds almost harmless when said like that. Carry the story. Remember the names. Tell the truth. It almost sounds noble. But the cabin did not preserve stories like a book. It preserved them like a grave preserves a body. I said, no. The word came out before I could stop it. Mom's head snapped toward me. The hand left my shoulder. Everything stopped. I realized what I had done. I had answered. Not a question, not a call, but I had spoken to it inside the cabin. The little door swung open all the way. Mom screamed. The bedroom folded. I know that doesn't make sense, but I don't have better words. The room did not change like scenery in a dream. It folded inward, the corners stretching away, the walls bending toward the open little door, as if the entire cabin were made of paper, and someone had pinched it at one point. The closet grew taller. The little door grew wider, or maybe I became smaller. The floor tilted under my feet, and I fell forward. Mom grabbed my arm. I grabbed the door frame. The crowbar clattered away into the dark. Behind the little door was no longer a crawl space. It was a stairway, narrow, steep, descending into black earth. The steps were made of wood at first, then stone, then packed dirt reinforced with roots. Along the walls, little handprints glowed faintly in the darkness, not with light exactly, more like moonlight under skin. From below came whispers, so many whispers: Daniel, Danny, son, boy, reader, mine. Mom held onto my arm with both hands. Her heels dragged on the floor as something pulled me toward the stairs. I tried to crawl backward. The floorboards beneath me softened like mud. My fingers dug grooves into the wood. Mom shouted, "Take me instead." The pulling stopped. I looked at her. "Mom, don't." She was staring into the stairway. "I'm the name he gave you." From below, Peter whispered, "No, Em." Mom said, "I'm the one who was promised." Peter said, "Not anymore." The thing behind us spoke in my father's voice again. She waited too long. Then another voice joined it. Grandma's voice, old, tired, full of grief. She had a son. Mom went still. The wall beside the closet darkened. Black lines spread across it, forming words in slow strokes. The name passes down. Mom stared at them. Then she looked at me. And in her face, I saw the thing she had been trying not to know since the voice first came from her closet. The ribbon had bought her time. Peter had kept the door shut. Grandpa had held something back from the wrong side. Grandma had researched and remembered and warned. Mom had stayed away. But then she had me, a child, a name, a way forward. The thing below pulled again. This time harder. My grip slipped. Mom screamed and wrapped both arms around my chest, trying to hold me back. I felt her feet slide across the floor behind me. Her cheek pressed against the back of my neck. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." The stairway breathed cold air over my face. At the bottom, something moved. I saw children standing on the steps. Not all the way up, just far enough to be seen. Their faces were dirty. Their clothes were old. Some were infants held by women with hollow eyes. Some were older children with lips sewn shut. Some had no faces at all, only blank skin where features should have been. They did not look angry. That made it worse. They looked expectant, like I was late. Then Peter stepped between them. He looked exactly like the boy from the Polaroids, 10 years old and barefoot, with a bruise around one ankle and dirt under his nails. He looked at my mother, then at me. "I can hold it once more," he said. Mom sobbed his name. Peter smiled sadly. "Don't answer this time." Before I could ask what he meant, he turned toward the darkness below him and shouted, "Daniel isn't yours." The stairway erupted, not with fire or light, with voices, hundreds of them. They screamed from the steps, the walls, the floor, the handprints, the roots. The bedroom shook so violently that the cracked mirror fell from the wall and shattered. The bed frame slid across the floor. The closet door slammed open and shut over and over again. The force pulling me vanished. Mom and I fell backward into the bedroom. The little door began to close. From below, Peter screamed. Mom lunged toward the stairway. I grabbed her this time. I held on with everything I had. Peter stood halfway down the impossible stairs, both arms stretched wide, as if holding back a crowd we could not see. Behind him, roots wrapped around his legs. Small hands gripped his shirt. The stitched-mouthed woman bent over him, her black thread mouth straining as if she were trying to speak. Peter looked up at Mom. "Tell them," he said. Mom cried. "Tell who?" "Everyone." The door closed another few inches. Peter's face twisted in pain. "All the names you can find." Mom said, "I will. Not enough. What do you want?" Peter looked at me. Then he said, "He writes." I felt the room turn toward me. Every handprint, every shadow, every buried thing, Peter said. "Make him write us out." The little door slammed shut. The lock turned by itself. The bedroom was suddenly normal again. No stairway, no cold wind, no children on the steps. Just an old room with filthy walls, a broken mirror, and my mother collapsed on the floor in front of a tiny locked door. For maybe 10 seconds, neither of us moved. Then the front door opened somewhere in the main room. Sunlight entered the cabin. Real sunlight. Mom lifted her head. I helped her stand. Her face looked destroyed. In the closet, beneath the little door, something blue stuck out from the crack near the floor. Mom saw it and covered her mouth. I bent down and pulled it free. It was a ribbon. Old, faded, frayed at both ends. But tied around it was a strip of paper. On the paper, written in a child's shaky handwriting, were 3 words. "Start with Mary, start with Mary." That was what the paper said. 3 words written in a child's hand. Tied to my mother's old blue ribbon, pushed out from under a door that should not have opened into anything. I stood there, holding it like it might bite me. Mom reached for the ribbon, but stopped before touching it. Her fingers hovered a few inches away, shaking. For a second, I thought she was going to say Peter's name again. I could see it forming in her throat, pushing up through all that grief and shock and childhood guilt. But she remembered in time. She closed her mouth, pressed her fist against it, and turned away. The cabin was quiet. Too quiet, obviously, but not in the same way as before. The heavy attention had lifted. The handprints on the bedroom walls looked like stains again. The little door sat closed and ordinary at the base of the closet. The cracked mirror lay in pieces on the floor. Sunlight came through the dirty window in a thin gray sheet. From the main room, the open front door showed a piece of the porch and the pale daylight beyond it. I wanted to run straight through it. Mom did too. I could tell. But for maybe half a minute, neither of us moved. We had survived something, or been released by it. And there's this strange thing that happens after fear lets go, where the body doesn't believe it. It keeps waiting for the next hand, the next voice, the next impossible thing. I whispered, "We need to leave." Mom nodded. I put the ribbon and the paper in my jacket pocket because I didn't know what else to do. Then I picked up the crowbar, even though it had done absolutely nothing useful, and helped Mom step over the broken glass. As we crossed the bedroom, a floorboard creaked behind us. We both froze. Nothing followed. But from inside the closet, so faint I almost convinced myself I imagined it. A child whispered, "Mary." Mom shut her eyes. I grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the hallway. The main room looked different too. Not cleaner, not safer, just emptied. The black lines on the floor had faded back into the cracks. The kitchen window still had the words written in dust, but the letters were already losing shape, as if the glass had begun to forget them. "He learned you too." Mom refused to look at them. I looked up at the loft by accident. That was stupid. I know it was stupid, but I did. The loft was empty except for old blankets, dust, and the dark square of the floor opening where the ladder came down. Nothing crouched up there. Nothing watched us. No dead father, no long arms, no pale face. Then, as I lowered my eyes, I saw a strip of cloth tied around the top rung of the ladder blue. Another ribbon. No, not another. The same one. I slapped my hand over the pocket of my jacket. The ribbon was still there. I could feel it through the fabric. The one on the ladder shifted slightly, even though there was no wind. Mom whispered, "Don't." I know. The strip of cloth slid free from the rung and dropped. It landed without a sound. When it hit the floor, it was not a ribbon anymore. It was a piece of hospital tubing, clear plastic, the kind that had been taped to my father's hand when he was dying. I stopped breathing. Mom grabbed my sleeve. "Daniel." I stared at it. The tubing twitched on the floor like a worm. Then my father's voice came from the loft, very softly. "Don't leave me here." Mom pulled me so hard I stumbled. "Move," I moved. Not because I was brave, because she pulled first. We crossed the main room, avoiding the black lines as much as possible. The open door waited ahead of us, and for one awful second I thought it would slam shut again when we got close. It didn't. We stepped onto the porch. The outside air hit me like water, cold, damp, and real. I had never been so grateful for trees. Then I looked at the clearing and almost wished we were still inside. Every mound in the clearing had changed. The moss and leaves covering them had split open, not completely, but enough to show dark soil beneath. It looked like the ground had been breathing while we were in the cabin. Little cracks ran across the earth. Small holes had opened near some of the mounds. I saw the toe of that old-fashioned child's shoe sticking out from one of them, though I was almost certain we had passed it on the road earlier. Mom saw it too. "Don't count," she said. I'm not. I was, not intentionally. My eyes kept trying to make order out of what I was seeing. One mound near the porch, 3 by the stump, 2 near the truck, a crooked row of maybe 7 or 8 along the edge of the trees. The more I noticed, the colder my head felt, like each number was a little hook sinking into my thoughts. Mom slapped me, not hard. Hard enough. I blinked and looked at her. She said, "Stop counting." I nodded. We walked to the car without looking down. That sounds easier than it was. The ground was uneven, and every step felt like disrespect. Like I was walking over a cemetery without stones. Something under my left foot shifted once with a soft crunch, and I nearly threw up. At the car, I reached for the driver's door. It was locked. I had not locked it. I checked my pocket for the keys and found nothing. Panic hit me so fast I couldn't think. I patted every pocket, jacket, jeans, back pockets, nothing. I looked through the driver's window and saw the keys hanging from the ignition. Inside the locked car. Mom looked toward the cabin. The front door was still open, I said. No. Her voice was flat. We can break the window. I almost laughed because, for once, that was exactly what the crowbar was good for. I stepped back, raised it, and swung at the passenger window. The crowbar bounced. Pain shot up my arm. The glass didn't crack. I hit it again, nothing. Again, nothing. Behind us, the cabin door creaked. Mom and I both turned. It had opened wider, not shut. Wider, like an invitation. The keys jingled inside the car. I looked back. They were no longer in the ignition. They were lying on the driver's seat. Next to them was a folded piece of paper. Mom whispered, "It wants you to read." I said, "I'm not reading anything in there." "Not in there," she said. She pointed. The paper was inside the car. I tried the handle again. Still locked. Mom walked to the rear passenger door and pressed her hand flat against the glass. "Peter," she whispered, then caught herself and went pale. Nothing happened. I thought we were done. Then the lock popped up. Just one. The rear passenger door unlocked. I opened it slowly. No voices came from inside. No cold air poured out. No child laughed. The car smelled like coffee, old upholstery, and the trail mix Mom had dropped on the floor earlier. I reached across the seat, grabbed the keys and the paper, then pulled back fast and slammed the door. The lock dropped by itself. Mom said, "What does it say?" I unfolded the paper. It was not old. It was from one of Grandma's notebooks, the same kind of lined paper Mom had shown me in the box. The handwriting was Grandma's, but shakier than in the notes I had already seen. At the top she had written, "Names confirmed." Below that was a list: Mary Bell, Eliza Bell's son, unnamed, Ruthie Mae Bell, Samuel T. Bell, Anna Grace Bell, Thomas Bell, infant, Grace Bell, unnamed twin. Then more. Some names had dates, some had question marks, some had only descriptions. Girl from Miller Farm, baby of Cora, servant, boy buried West Root, child in flour sack, twins, no baptism. My hand started shaking as I read. There were 23 entries. At the bottom, Grandma had written, "There are more. The house will not rest without all of them." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "She found this," I said. "You didn't know." She shook her head. "I never saw that page." The cabin door creaked again. From inside, a woman's voice whispered, "Not all." I folded the paper. Mom grabbed my wrist. "We are leaving." The second she said it, every car door unlocked. Click, 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 click. I got into the driver's seat. Mom got in beside me. I put the key in the ignition, expecting the engine not to start. But it did. First try. Just like the truck had for Grandma. I did not think anything. I did not look at the cabin. I put the car in reverse and backed toward the road. The clearing stayed still. That was almost worse than if the dead had rushed us. The mounds did not open. The windows did not fill with faces. Peter did not appear at the tree line. My father did not call from the porch. The cabin simply watched us leave without eyes. As we reached the old track, Mom whispered, "I'm sorry." I kept my eyes on the road. For what? For bringing you. I wanted to say it was okay. It wasn't, so I said nothing. The drive out was different from the drive in. The road seemed shorter. The branches didn't scrape the car as much. The woods were still quiet, but not as completely. At one point I heard a bird. Just one, somewhere far off, and the sound almost made me cry. We passed the flat stone where the shoe had been. It was empty. Mom held the folded list in both hands. I said, "Do you think it gave this to us?" She stared down at the names. "No." "Then who?" She touched the first name. "Peter." I thought about the little door, the stairs, my uncle standing in that impossible dark, holding back whatever waited below. I thought about him telling us to start with Mary. I thought about the voice saying he had not been good, that he had given them Mom's name when he was angry, that the story my mother carried had turned him into a better boy than he really was. Maybe that was true. Maybe he had been scared and selfish. Maybe he had done something cruel without understanding the cost. But he had also stayed behind, for decades, holding a door shut from the wrong side, or trying to. People are complicated like that, I guess. Even dead ones. We made it back to the main road just after noon. My phone signal returned in 1 bar, then 2. The first thing that happened was my phone buzzed. I nearly threw it out the window. Mom grabbed my arm. I pulled over on the shoulder and looked at the screen. A text from Mom. But Mom was sitting beside me, holding her dead phone. The message said, "Do not go home yet." Another buzz. "Find Mary first." Then another. "She is not below anymore." Mom read the messages over my shoulder, her face slack. "What does that mean?" I asked. She didn't answer. She was looking at the tree line across the road. I followed her gaze. There, standing between 2 pines in broad daylight, was a little girl. She wore a dirty white dress. Her hair hung over one shoulder. Her head was turned slightly too far. In her arms she held something wrapped in old cloth. Mom whispered, "Mary." The girl looked at me, then at Mom. Then she lifted one thin finger and pointed down the road. Not toward the cabin. Away from it, toward town. Then she was gone. I don't mean she walked away. She was there, then she wasn't. Mom's dead phone buzzed in her purse. She took it out with trembling hands. The screen lit up, even though it had no charge. One message. This one did not come from her number. It came from mine. Start where they lied. We sat on the side of that road for a long time after that. Neither of us said much, because the worst part had shifted again. The cabin was not finished with us, but it was no longer simply trying to keep us. Peter, or Mary, or something trapped inside that place had given us a task. Find the names, write them out, start where they lied. And as we drove away from those woods, with Grandma's hidden list folded in my mother's lap and my old family history cracking open like rotten wood, I understood something that made me feel almost as sick as the cabin itself. We had gone there to return a key, but the cabin had returned a story, and now it was mine. Start where they lied. That message followed us all the way back to town. Not literally, I guess. The phone stopped buzzing after Mary disappeared from the tree line, and for the rest of the drive my screen stayed dark and ordinary in the cup holder. Mom's phone remained dead in her purse. The radio didn't turn on by itself. No faces appeared in the rearview mirror. No child whispered from the back seat. But the message was there, in my head. Start where they lied. It sounded simple in the way terrible instructions often do. The problem was that our family had lied everywhere. They lied in letters. They lied in church records. They lied to neighbors. They lied to husbands, daughters, sons, doctors, sheriffs, pastors, and probably themselves most of all. They had taken violence and dressed it up as shame. They had taken shame and dressed it up as illness. They had taken children and turned them into absences. So where do you start when the lie is the foundation? Mom said nothing for almost 20 minutes after we saw Mary. She sat with Grandma's folded list in her lap and stared out the windshield at the road like she was watching years pass instead of mile markers. I could see her lips moving now and then, but no sound came out. At first I thought she was praying. Then I realized she was repeating the names. Mary Bell, Eliza's son, Ruthie Mae, Samuel T. Anna Grace, Thomas, Grace's twin, over and over, like she was afraid they might vanish if she stopped saying them in her head. I asked where we were going. Mom said, "The church." I almost asked what church, but then I understood. There was an old church about 40 minutes from the cabin road. Mom had mentioned it when going through Grandma's notes. Her family had attended it for generations, back when that part of the county was still full of farms and little settlements that barely existed anymore. Several Bell relatives were buried in the cemetery there. Some were probably baptized there. Some were married there. Some had their lies written down there in neat ink by men who either didn't know or didn't want to know the difference between stillborn and silenced. The church was where they made things official, so that was where they lied. We reached it a little after 1. It sat on a low hill behind a rusted iron fence, white paint peeling from the siding, steeple leaning slightly to one side like an old finger. The sign out front said services were held only twice a month now. A newer church had been built closer to town, and this one survived mostly as a historical building, a wedding backdrop, and a cemetery people visited when they still had relatives old enough to remember who was buried there. The parking lot was empty. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. Mom got out with the list. I grabbed Grandma's box from the back seat. We had not planned on bringing the whole thing into the church, but after the phone messages, I didn't want to leave the letters in the car. It felt wrong, like abandoning evidence at a crime scene. The church door was locked. Of course it was. Mom stood there staring at the knob as if this single ordinary obstacle had finally defeated her in a way the cabin couldn't. Then she laughed. Just once. A dry, humorless little sound. I said, "Maybe there's an office number." Before she could answer, something clicked inside the door. The lock turned. The door opened about an inch. Mom and I looked at each other. I said, "Nope." Mom said, "Daniel, no. That is exactly the kind of thing we are not supposed to do. We were told to start here. We were told by a ghost child on a road after almost getting dragged into a dirt stairway." She actually smiled then, just barely. And if there is one thing I've learned from all this, it's that some houses don't haunt you because they want to be remembered. Some haunt you because they are terrified of what will happen when they finally are. So I'll keep writing. I'll keep looking. I'll keep the key locked away as best I can. And if I ever have children of my own, I'll tell them the truth before the woods can whisper it first. Because my mother's cabin is still out there, still standing in the trees, still dark behind the windows, still waiting beside all those little mounds in the clearing. And above the door, carved deeper than ever, are the only words that ever really mattered there. Be still.